Chapter 381. Fellow Daoist Qin. Noticing that someone was approaching, the two of them stopped talking. Then Tiansan's voice came from outside. Fellow Daoist Tianken? Mo Tiange raised her voice. Tianken came in from the tree hole and nodded at the two of them. It seems fellow Daoist Ling's injuries are all right. Ling Yunhe showed a friendly but distant smile. Thank you for your concern, fellow Daoist Tianken. Where are the others? How are they? Very good. Tiansan's eyes paused on the two of them for a while, then moved away as if nothing had happened. Fellow Daoist Yang said he's fine now. That's good. Ling Yunhe nodded, adjusted the spiritual aura in his body again, and stood up. Let's meet up. After Ling Yunhe walked out, Tiansan's gaze fell on Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange smiled indifferently. The conversation between her and Ling Yunhe didn't affect the agreement between her and Tianken. If Ling Yunhe didn't turn hostile, she and Tianken wouldn't have to turn against each other. If Ling Yunhe really had other intentions, she certainly wouldn't resign herself to death because of his words. The three of them walked out of the tree hole with their own thoughts. They found this tree hole when they found Ling Yunhe. This tree hole grew between a place with spiritual aura and a place with devil aura, but it wasn't affected by the two auras. No one knew how long it had been growing here, but it formed a natural tree hole, which was perfect for the heavily injured Ling Yunhe. As for the others, Yang Qingji went to the place with devil aura to heal himself. After Ling Yunhe settled down, Ling Yunfei adjusted his breath in a place with spiritual aura nearby. At this thought, Mo Tiange pondered. She came to see Ling Yunhe like this, but Tianken followed her closely and Ling Yunhe was injured. Wasn't Ling Yunfei worried at all? She always felt Ling Yunhe trusted Ling Yunfei too much. He trusted him so much that he treated him like his own limbs. Not only did he not doubt him, but he also didn't seem to want to win him over. Mo Tiange hoped his trust would be reciprocated. Second brother. Ling Yunfei rushed over in surprise when he saw Ling Yunhe. Are you really okay? Ling Yunhe smiled at him. Fellow Daoist Qin's medicinal pills are really miraculous. Yes, I have to thank fellow Daoist Qin. Ling Yunfei cupped his hands and bowed towards Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange said faintly, fellow Daoist Yunfei doesn't need to be too polite. I gave you the medicinal pills, but I also accepted your things. Ling Yunfei's healing medicinal pills didn't have any effect, so he used some materials to exchange with others. In the end, Mo Tiange took out her own medicinal pills. The two brothers talked for a while more, and Ling Yunfei excitedly ran off to find Yang Qingji. Very soon, the six of them met up again. Fellow Daoist Yang, how are your injuries? Ling Yunhe asked Yang Qingji with concern. Most of the devil qi on his body dissipated, revealing a pale and unruly face. This wasn't Mo Tiange's first time seeing Yang Qingji's true appearance, but she still found it very interesting. When he was surrounded by the demonic energy, Yang Qingji had always maintained a calm image. In the end, he discovered that he was still such a young and immature youth. The contrast was too great. It's fine. Yang Qingji's voice was low and his expression was wooden. Fellow Daoist Ling, you can continue to move at any time. Ling Yunhe looked at the others and said, that being the case, I won't talk nonsense. We've been delayed for a few days. If we stay in Carefree Valley any longer, even with the soul-restraining bead, our cultivation will be affected. Let's go now. We'll talk on the way. Brother Ling, how about your injuries? Tian Jiqian asked. Although you've suppressed your injuries, if you fight, you seem to be a bit weak, right? It doesn't matter. Ling Yunhe said, fellow Daoist Qin's medicinal pills are very good. Now that my dantian and meridians are protected, I'll take some healing medicinal pills. It won't be a problem to fight. At most, it'll be a bit troublesome when we return. Is that so? Tian Jiqian looked at Mo Tiange in surprise. I didn't expect fellow Daoist Qin to not only have outstanding magic weapons, but also have such miraculous medicinal pills. He originally thought it was just some strong healing medicinal pills. He didn't expect it could actually treat the injuries of her dantian and meridians. Mo Tiange smiled without saying anything. Among the people present, who didn't have some spiritual treasures? She wasn't the only one. After a simple agreement, everyone packed up and once again set out on their journey. Ling Yunhe said the carefree fruit could grow anywhere in Carefree Valley. Moreover, it could burrow into the ground and escape like a living thing. Therefore, they had no other choice but to walk all over Carefree Valley. Carefree Valley was too big, so the process of finding the fruit definitely wouldn't be easy. Before encountering the 3 giant apes, they had just entered the valley, so they hadn't gone to many places yet. From now on, there were many places they had to search, so they couldn't waste any more time. Ling Yunhe and Yang Qingji were injured, so they stayed at the back. Ling Yunfei and Tianqin led the way, while they and Tian Jiqin walked in the middle. Mo Tiange stayed at the back. After walking for a while, Tian Jiqin turned around and deliberately stopped, waiting for Mo Tiange to catch up. Fellow Daoist Qin. Mo Tiange vigilantly paid attention to her surroundings while nodding calmly. Fellow Daoist Tian, what's the matter? Tian Jiqin hesitated for a moment before saying, when we encountered the giant apes a few days ago, I saw fellow Daoist Qin's magic weapon seem to be a formation tool. Mo Tiange said, it can't be considered a formation tool, it just has the ability of an illusory formation. Tian Jiqian's eyes brightened. This kind of magic weapon is rare. Could fellow Daoist Qin tell me more about it? He added, if it's not convenient, fellow Daoist can talk to me about the Tao of formations. Let's forget about the magic weapon. Before Mo Tiange could say anything, Ling Yunhe, who was walking in front of them, turned around and said with a smile, fellow Daoist Qin, this brother Tian of mine doesn't have any hobbies in his life, but he likes to study the Tao of formations. He's eager to hunt now. If you don't tell him, he'll be itching for several days. If you don't have any secrets, fellow Daoist, please tell me. There's nothing to hide, Mo Tiange said with a smile. It's just that when I was refining the magic weapon, I added some formation-laying methods. A formation expert like fellow Daoist Tian will understand after listening to me. Soon after, Mo Tiange briefly told Tian Jiqin about the illusory formation in the Heaven and Earth Fan. In fact, the illusory formation in the Heaven and Earth Fan wasn't exquisite, but it was a natal magic weapon that could always be nourished in the Dantian. If there was anything wrong with it, it could always be modified. Therefore, even if she told Tian Jiqin now, he couldn't just break the illusory formation in the Heaven and Earth Fan. After all, the Tao of formations focused on practicality. Even aura refining formation masters knew the basic Tao of yin and yang of the 5 elements like the back of their hands. However, if they wanted to use it in formations, they needed a deep understanding of it and a subtle grasp of spiritual aura. In this regard, the advantage of the Heaven and Earth Fan was obvious. It could change according to its master's will. Every time it laid an illusory formation, it would be different. As long as the foundation of the illusory formation was grasped, the Heaven and Earth Fan could change itself at will. Tian Jiqian's eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. Most of the cultivators in our 5 Elements Valley's natal magic weapons are formation-laying tools, but none of them are like fellow Daoist Qin. You can move and stay still, attack and defend at the same time. Not only can you lay formations at any time, but you can also use spells to break the enemy. It turns out fellow Daoist Qin has such profound attainments in formations. I've benefited a lot from your words. Thank you, thank you. As he spoke, he bowed repeatedly. Mo Tiange smiled and said, although I've learned the Tao of formations from my family, I'm not a formation master like fellow Daoist Tian. The reason I was able to refine this kind of magic weapon was because of my elder's guidance. I didn't do it alone. Tian Jiqin became even more excited. May I know where fellow Daoist Qin lives? Can I pay you a visit? Mo Tiange shook her head awkwardly. Fellow Daoist Tian should know that I've lived in the outer endless sea for a long time, which is quite far from Yunzhong. I'm afraid it won't be convenient. Oh. Tian Jiqin looked disappointed. Brother Tian. Ling Yunhe turned around and said with a smile, if worst comes to worst, we'll invite fellow Daoist Qin to stay in our Ling clan for a while after this is done. You two can exchange more about the Tao of formations. You're right. Tian Jiqin became happy again. He cupped his hands towards Imotienga and said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, please don't refuse. I also want to invite fellow Daoist Qin to our 5 Elements Valley to exchange more pointers with us." Imotienga smiled. "It's also my honor to exchange pointers with the formation masters of 5 Elements Valley." "Then it's a deal," Tian Jiqin said hurriedly, afraid she'd go back on her word. Imotienga smiled helplessly. Although she was proficient in the Tao of formations, she might not be as good as a master like Tian Jiqin. However, when he heard there was a formation technique he didn't know, he eagerly asked for advice. He was really an idiot. "Second brother." Ling Yunfei turned around and said hesitantly, "There seems to be something in front of us." Imotienga had long noticed that the fluctuation of breath in front of them was unusual. Ling Yunha's divine sense wasn't inferior to hers, so he must have noticed it long ago. However, his expression remained the same, so he must have already prepared a countermeasure. "Sure enough," Ling Yunha said calmly, "I know. Continue." Ling Yunfei turned around and continued to lead the way. After walking for a while, they saw a stone forest filled with oddly shaped rocks. Ling Yunfei and Tonghan stopped in their tracks. "Second brother, this is..." Between the strange stones in the stone forest, there were spiritual light and devil light visible to the naked eye, as well as light particles floating in the air. In all her years of life, Imotienga had never seen such a strange and bizarre scene. In the inner valley of Carefree Valley, spiritual aura, devil aura, and filthy aura were intertwined and distributed as if they were demarcated on a chessboard. Each had its own territory and didn't interfere with the other. The outer valley, on the other hand, was a place where the 3 qi intersected and the qi was chaotic. Once cultivators entered, their qi would be affected and become unstable. They needed the spirit-restraining orb and Tian Jiqin's array to display their usual strength. But in this stone forest, it was completely different from the outer valley and the other places in the inner valley. It could be said that its aura was mixed, but the 3 auras all turned into spiritual light and danced in the air. It could be said that its aura was stable, but the filthy aura of spirit and devil aura were mixed together, so ordinary people couldn't step in at all. The scene in front of them was like pouring 3 kinds of pigments into water, stirring them, and mixing them into a new color that was indistinguishable from each other. Upon a closer look, these 3 lights were clearly separated by a similar distance, yet they seemed to interweave into a net, blocking everyone's path. "How do we get past this?" Tianqin muttered to himself. He looked around, but there was no other way out. When he flew into the air, he realized that this net went all the way to the sky. Even if he could fly past it, it would be beyond the range of Ling Yunha's senses. In that case, if the carefree fruit was in the stone forest, he wouldn't be able to sense it. "Fellow Daoist Ling, you have a way, right?" Tianqin asked. Ling Yunha nodded. "Of course." Chapter 382. Ling Yunha took out a jade bottle from his Qingkuan bag and raised his hand. The jade bottle flew up and floated in the air. "Brother Tian!" Ling Yunha shouted. Tian Jiqin immediately answered, "I know." As he spoke, he pointed with his spiritual aura and the jade plate in his hand spun rapidly. Right at that moment, a puff of smoke rose from the jade bottle in the air. Suddenly, a refreshing fragrance appeared in their surroundings, making them feel refreshed. The spiritual aura inside their bodies started to circulate faster. On Tian Jiqin's jade plate, yin and yang flashed and the 5 elements moved from slow to fast and from fast to slow. After a long time, it finally stopped. When the needle on the jade plate stopped completely, Tian Jiqin pointed with his right hand and shot out an invisible spiritual energy. "Stop." A steady force flowed out, and the light of the 3 qi in the surroundings suddenly stopped, no longer drifting. Ling Yunha immediately jumped up. An ordinary cloth bag appeared in his hand. He began to wave it left and right, collecting the light particles condensed from the 3 qis into the bag as if they were tangible beads. As he waved the cloth bag, the light particles in the stone forest became fewer and fewer, gradually clearing a path. After a while, Ling Yunha finally stopped. He wiped his face and said to the others, "Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist team, use your spiritual aura to protect us. Mo Tiange and Tianqin nodded. They then used their auras to form a spiritual aura barrier around the 6 of them, blocking the light of the 3 qis outside. Second brother, are your injuries okay? Ling Yunfei asked. They're fine. It's just a loss of spiritual aura. All right, let's not waste time. Let's go. The 6 of them entered the passage. When they reached the end, Ling Yunhe handed the cloth bag to Ling Yunfei. Ling Yunfei used the same method to clear a path. Although Ling Yunfei's cultivation level wasn't high, he wasn't bad at spells. Moreover, the stone forest wasn't too deep, so the path was cleared very quickly. When the 6 of them were about to walk out of the stone forest, the jade bottle in the air suddenly swayed and fell from above. Brother Ling! Tian Zhiqian reacted quickly and hurriedly retreated as he shouted. Seeing this, Ling Yunhe's expression changed. He crossed his hands and made a set of complicated hand seals, hitting the jade bottle. Halfway to the ground, the cloud-ascending crane caught the jade bottle and stopped its fall. However, it could not stabilize itself. It swayed as if it was struggling between 2 forces. Ling Yunhe's face flushed red as he struggled to form another set of hand seals. Finally, the jade bottle slowly stabilized. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Just as they were about to continue forward, the 3 lights that had been cleared suddenly flashed again, intertwining to form a net that trapped the 6 of them in the center. At the same time, the fragrance emitted by the jade bottle suddenly disappeared. What's going on? Yang Qingji looked around and said, It seems like the aura has suddenly become chaotic? Everyone else felt what he said. The moment Ling Yunhe's jade bottle swayed, the originally stable light of the 3 qi in the stone forest suddenly became chaotic. It seemed that there was no order to follow, and it began to crisscross chaotically. This situation was a little similar to when they first entered the outer valley, but the 3 qis here were even more complicated and intertwined, making the situation even more complicated and inexplicably strange. What should we do? Ling Yunfei turned around and asked Ling Yunhe. Ling Yunhe's face turned green, and he didn't say anything for a long time. The fragrance emitted by the jade bottle was a kind of spiritual item that could refresh one's spirit. It could temporarily increase their strength while they were surrounded by the light of the 3 qi. Under such circumstances, Tian Zhiqian used the jade plate to stabilize the yin, yang, and 5 elements in the surroundings and then used the cloth bag to clear the light of the 3 qi. This way, it wouldn't cause the surrounding aura to become turbulent and cause more variables. But now, the power of the light of the 3 qi exceeded his estimation. The jade bottle couldn't hold on any longer. Without the jade bottle's help, Tian Zhiqian's ability wasn't strong enough to maintain the secret technique. The stable situation they previously maintained collapsed in an instant. What should we do? Mo Tiange's mind was also spinning quickly. Should she help Tian Zhiqian stabilize the yin, yang, and 5 elements in the surroundings and let him use the technique again? Tian Zhiqian's face was pale. Obviously, he used too much of his spiritual aura just now. Ordinary core formation cultivators couldn't use techniques like stabilizing the yin, yang, and 5 elements. Even if he wanted to use it now, he might not be able to. Should he protect his spiritual aura and rush out? That wouldn't work either. The light of the 3 qi was too strange. It definitely couldn't be withstood by a simple spiritual aura protection. Before she could figure out what to do, Ling Yunhe suddenly took out the spirit confining bead from his robe. He touched the space between his eyebrows, forcing out a drop of blood essence and smearing it on the spirit confining bead. In an instant, the bead shone brightly and flew into the air. When the spirit confining bead's light and the light of the 3 qi collided, a low buzzing sound rang out. Everyone felt their minds go into a trance and the surrounding aura changed again. The spirit confining bead's light carried a formidable power, wanting to subdue the light of the 3 qi. The light of the 3 qi was unwilling to be subdued and resisted with all its strength. The 2 forces were both very powerful and began to compete with each other. Comparatively speaking, the momentum of the spirit confining bead was a bit stronger. Since this bead was Ling clan's heirloom, it wasn't easily revealed in front of others, so it naturally had its own peculiarities. Just now, Ling Yunhe fed it blood essence, so its momentum was even more astonishing. However, although the momentum of the light of the three qi was inferior, they were connected and supported each other, while the spirit confining bead was isolated and helpless. As time went by, the light of the spirit confining bead became weaker and weaker, while the light of the three qi became brighter and brighter. No! Ling Yunfei shouted, "Second brother, this won't do. The spirit confining bead's power isn't enough." How could Ling Yunhe not know? The spirit confining bead could control the chaotic spiritual energy around it, but it couldn't sort it out. It could only subdue it. However, to subdue it required a much more powerful force. If it wasn't enough, then it could only be destroyed. However, he couldn't think of any other way. He was good at fighting but not at dealing with this kind of chaotic situation. This was why he specially asked Tian Zhiqian to come with him. But now Tian Zhiqian was powerless even though he wanted to. Seeing that the light of the spirit confining bead was getting weaker and weaker, the others knew that they couldn't rely on it anymore. They weren't people who would wait for death without a fight. In an instant they all used their own techniques. Yang Qingji's ghost face banner unfurled. Demonic energy gathered, forming a line that surrounded the six of them. Tian Can didn't say a word. Suddenly, he punched the ground fiercely, causing dust to fly up and forming a circle of wind around the six of them. Ling Yunfei threw out a small flag. The small flag grew in the wind and became as big as a mat, withstanding the pressure from above. Just then, there was another buzz. The light of the spirit confining bead suddenly extinguished, and it fell from the sky. Ling Yunhe reached out to take it, his face ashen. This spirit confining bead was personally given to him by the Ling family's nascent soul stage ancestors. This represented their trust and expectation towards him. But now, the light of the spirit confining bead was extinguished, and it had lost all its power. Even if it wasn't destroyed, its vitality was greatly damaged. If he could successfully bring the carefree fruit back and obtain the position of sect leader, this price would be worth it. But now, they were surrounded by the light of three qi. They might not even be able to keep their lives. There was no time to think. After the spirit confining bead was extinguished, the other three's defensive methods were met with a strong impact. Luckily, although the three of them looked troubled, they were able to hold on. Ling Yunfei held on with difficulty for a while. With a pale face, he shouted, "Second brother, we can't. We have to find a way to stabilize our aura, otherwise, they would be like a lone boat on the sea in a storm, torn to pieces by the waves." Ling Yunhe didn't say a word and reached into his spirit beast pouch. The fifth-rank vulture let out an ear-piercing cry and rushed out. Death energy filled the air, blocking the filthy energy that was rushing towards them. Mo Tiange shook her sleeve, and the Tai Chi 8 trigrams diagram was thrown into the air. With a flash of spiritual light, the scroll slowly unfolded. As the Tai Chi 8 trigrams diagram unfolded, waves of spiritual aura rippled around the scroll. This wave of light slowly spread, and wherever it reached, the aura fluctuations gradually stabilized. Upon seeing this, Ling Yunhe was overjoyed. Fellow Daoist Qin. The spirit confining bead's function in breaking restrictions was superior to the Tai Chi 8 trigrams diagram. However, the real use of the Tai Chi 8 trigrams diagram was to sort out spiritual aura and stabilize yin, yang, and the 5 elements. After a while, the spiritual aura and devil aura were sorted out by the Tai Chi 8 trigrams diagram, leaving only the filthy aura drifting around. However, as long as the spiritual aura fluctuations stabilized, this wasn't a difficult thing for the 6 of them. Tian Zhiqian swallowed a medicinal pill, then spun the jade plate again, quickly laying an invisible formation. Soon after, Ling Yunhe threw out a defensive magic weapon, which formed several lines of defense with the others' defensive magic weapons. With the addition of the vulture's dead aura, the situation finally stabilized. When the 6 of them came out of the stone forest, they all felt exhausted. Ling Yunhe and Yang Qingji were injured, Ling Yunfei and Tian Zhiqian cleared the 3 auras, and Mo Tiange and Tian Can used their aura to protect the others. In the end, the 6 of them attacked together, almost using all their trump cards, and their spiritual aura was greatly damaged. However, Imotienga still had it easy. She had the primal chaos origin, so her spiritual aura circulation was fast. In addition, she had the Tai Chi 8 trigrams diagram in her sleeve, so she was less affected by the 3 auras intertwining. When they came out, the 6 of them were so exhausted that they almost couldn't care less about their appearances. They directly sat on the ground, panting heavily. After a while, Ling Yunfei calmed down and looked back at the stone forest with lingering fear. Fortunately, the fretless fruit isn't here. Otherwise, it would have been troublesome. Ling Yunhe had already calmed down and was sitting cross-legged to adjust his breath. When he heard what Imotienga said, he shook his head. It's better here. Although the 3 auras in the stone forest are troublesome, there's always a way to solve them. It's always troublesome to find the fretless fruit, but it'll be easy once we find it. Second brother. Ling Yunfei was dissatisfied. We almost died in there, but you make it sound so easy. Ling Yunhe didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, These fellow Daoists aren't ordinary people. They won't die so easily. As he spoke, he glanced at the others one by one and finally fixed his gaze on Imotienga. Fellow Daoist Qin, I have to thank you this time. Fortunately, you have such a treasure. Imotienga was leaning against a tree to rest. She was the most relaxed among the 6 of them, but she also consumed a lot of spiritual aura. Right now, she swallowed some high-grade restorative panaceas and took several middle-grade spirit stones to replenish her spiritual aura. Upon hearing Ling Yunhe's voice, she opened her eyes. Even without my magic weapon, fellow Daoists should have been able to escape safely. Fellow Daoist Ling is too polite. But with this thing, it'll be a lot easier for us. Ling Yunhe, who was still staring at her, suddenly asked, Fellow Daoist Qin, where did you get such an amazing spiritual treasure? Chapter 383. Silence. When Ling Yunhe asked that question, all 5 people's gazes fell on Imotienga. Some of them were curious, and some were even more vigilant, but no one spoke. Just saying she came from the outer endless sea certainly couldn't dispel their doubts. The cultivators in Yunzhong had a deep-rooted belief that the cultivators in the outer endless sea couldn't compare to those in Yunzhong. Even the continents in the outer endless sea, Yuanzhou and Shaoyang, were the same. But this female cultivator who called herself Qin Wei didn't think so. Her natal magic weapon and spiritual beast were unusual, and now she even had a magic weapon that was almost as good as the soul-restricting bead. Even in Yunzhong, there weren't many cultivators like her. According to her, she had an elder in her family who had profound cultivation levels and many spiritual treasures. How could such a cultivation clan exist in a desolate place like the outer endless sea? It had to be known that clans and sects were always matched with spirit veins. It was impossible for low-grade spirit veins to produce large clans with high-grade cultivators, but high-grade spirit veins would sooner or later become the base of large sects or cultivation clans. The outer endless sea was famous for being desolate. Even if there were spirit veins on the sea, they couldn't compare to those large spirit veins in Yunzhong. So how could such a large clan appear? Under the gazes of the 5 people, Imotienga looked calm and said faintly, I came from the outer endless sea by crossing the sea. After a long time, Ling Yunhe moved the corner of his mouth and revealed a smile. The outer endless sea. I never thought there would be a cultivator like fellow Daoist Qin in the outer endless sea. If there's a chance, I must go to fellow Daoist Qin's hometown to take a look. Okay, if we're fated. After Imotienga finished speaking, she glanced at her temporary companions with a warning look. She gently tapped the heaven and earth fan in her hand, smiled, and closed her eyes to adjust her breath. She was warning some people not to attack her easily, or they would have to pay the price. Among the 6 people, her spiritual aura consumption was the lowest. Moreover, in Carefree Valley where the aura was chaotic, the treasures she had were more suitable for survival than theirs. After a short adjustment, the 6 people gathered again. What should we do now? Ling Yunfei was the first to lose his patience. He looked at Ling Yunhe and asked, should we continue? Of course, fellow cultivator Ling. Yang Qingji interrupted Ling Yunhe before he could finish his sentence. He said coldly, I don't agree to continue. We are either injured or our cultivations are damaged. If we continue like this, we will all die here. I agree, Tiancan said coldly. Fellow cultivator Ling, I don't care about the others. I did accept your gift to do my job, but the gift you gave me is not worth my life. While they were talking, Ling Yunhe listened with a smile on his face. When Tiancan finished, he looked at Imotienga and asked, What about fellow Daoist Qin? Imotienga tapped the heaven and earth fan lightly and said faintly, What fellow Daoist Yang and fellow Daoist Tiancan said isn't unreasonable. So, all three fellow Daoists feel that it's inappropriate to continue? Imotienga and the others didn't answer, but their expressions already showed their attitude. The higher one's cultivation level was, the more they cherished their lives. It wasn't easy to cultivate to the core formation realm, and it was even more difficult for them to be as successful as they were. Moreover, they were between 100 and 300 years old, which was too young for core formation cultivators. How could they be willing to lose their lives here? Tian Zhiqian hesitated for a moment before he also said, Brother Ling, I also think that right now, we're all injured and weak. If we continue to search, it'll be very difficult to find any results. Ling Yunfei looked at the others and finally said, Second brother, I'll listen to you. Ling Yunhe nodded and said with a smile, Fellow Daoists, you're too impatient. I didn't say we should continue right now. Everyone was startled by his words. Ling Yunhe sighed and said, Before I left, I promised that I would put everyone's lives first. Besides, your concerns are very reasonable. Fellow Daoist Yang and I are injured, and the other fellow Daoists have used too much spiritual power. If we continue, I'm afraid we'll die here before we find the worryless fruit. I came here to find the worryless fruit and take back the position of sect leader. I don't want to die here for nothing. Ling Yunhe's attitude made everyone sigh in relief. If he insisted, it would be difficult to deal with them. Even if they split up, it would be very difficult for them to leave the worryless valley safely. This worryless valley was too strange. Yang Qingji softened his tone and asked, Then what does fellow Daoist Ling think we should do next? Naturally, we'll continue after we rest and reorganize, Ling Yunhe said. We lost too much just now, so we need to recover our strength first. Fellow Daoist Yang, how long do you think it'll take for your injuries to recover? Yang Qingji lowered his head, calculated, and answered, 3 days later, I'll be fine. Ling Yunhe was shocked. Although he didn't know much about the cultivation of a demonic cultivator, he could tell that Yang Qingji's injuries were not light. How could he be fine in 3 days? He quickly regained his composure and said, Then I'll have to trouble fellow Daoist Yang to wait a bit longer. My injuries might need 5 days. Ling Yunhe didn't wait for the others to answer and turned to Imotienga. Fellow Daoist Qin, does your magic weapon have the effect of stabilizing spiritual aura? Yes, Imotienga answered frankly. In any case, she had already used the Tai Chi 8 diagrams, so she didn't need to hide it. Ling Yunhe said, My soul restraining bead is too damaged and can't be used for the time being. Can I borrow your magic weapon? Imotienga smiled. Rest assured, fellow Daoist Ling. During this time, I'll use the Tai Chi 8 diagrams and cooperate with fellow Daoist Tian to ensure that you won't be affected by the chaotic aura in the worryless valley and that you'll be able to exert your strength. I'm grateful for fellow Daoist Qin's help. Ling Yunhe expressed his gratitude and said to the others, With fellow Daoist Qin's magic weapon and brother Tian's attainments in formations, it shouldn't be a problem for us to stay in the valley for a few days. During these days, fellow Daoist Yang and I will heal our injuries while the others can rest. We'll continue after we've recovered our strength. What do you think? I have no objection. Yang Qingji was the first to agree. He then nodded at the others and said, I'm going to find a place to heal my injuries. If there's anything else, you can look for me. After Yang Qingji left, Tiancan also stood up. That being the case, I'll also go rest. I used too much spiritual aura just now. After the two of them left, Ling Yunhe looked at Imotienga helplessly. Fellow Daoist Qin, then I'll also go rest. Imotienga nodded at the three of them, then found a place in Tian Zhiqian's defensive formation. After casting a spell on the Tai Chi 8 diagrams, she also closed her eyes and began to meditate. Seeing the three of them recuperating and meditating, Ling Yunhe, Tian Jiqian, and Tian Jiqian sat in silence for a while. Tian Jiqian asked, "Brother Ling, are they really reliable?" Ling Yunhe's gaze moved back and forth between Yang Qingji, Tian Can, and Demo Tiange. In the end, he shook his head. "I don't know. Second brother." Ling Yunfei raised his head and looked at him with a puzzled expression. "I don't understand. Why did you look for outsiders? Don't tell me there aren't many people you can trust in our Ling clan and the entire Juyan sect?" Ling Yunhe was speechless for a long time when he saw Ling Yunfei's puzzled expression. Then he called out again, "Second brother, I know you've always been smarter than me, but you shouldn't always keep things to yourself. I really want to know what you're thinking." "I'm sorry, Yunfei." Ling Yunhe was stunned by Ling Yunfei's distressed expression. He then apologized, "I wasn't thoughtful enough. I thought these things weren't important to you." "Then tell me," Ling Yunfei said, "Second brother, I hope I can help you. I don't want to be kept in the dark." Ling Yunhe was silent for a long time before he slowly nodded. "All right." He rubbed the space between his eyebrows and thought for a while before he said, "The Juyan sect's sect head selection has always been a power struggle between the sect and the clan. Every 100 years, during the sect head selection, there's always some internal strife, and even some elite cultivators we've trained with great difficulty are lost. The Grand Elders obviously know about these things, but why has the sect head selection continued and never been abolished?" "Why?" Ling Yunfei asked. "I've thought about this before, but I don't understand." "Because?" Ling Yunhe sighed and said, "Because our Jian sect is too big. It's so big that we have no rivals in the entire Yunzhong. It's so big that there are many factions, forming cliques for personal gain. We've lost the indifferent heart of a cultivator. Under these circumstances, if there's no internal strife to exhaust their energy and clear up the grievances between them, then in the end, as the conflicts accumulate, the Juyan sect will be like a long embankment that's long been eaten away by termites. It will collapse in one day and be completely destroyed." As Ling Yunhe spoke, Ling Yunfei's face became paler and paler. In the end, it almost turned into shock. "Our Juyan sect has already reached such a stage?" Even Tian Jiqian frowned. "It can't be." He was a cultivator from the Five Elements Valley. Although the Five Elements Valley was considered a large sect in the country of Eastern Tang, it wasn't at the level of the Juyan sect. Its nature was also different from the Juyan sect. There wasn't such a complicated situation. "I also hope that's not the case." Ling Yunhe smiled bitterly. "But this matter isn't considered a secret in the entire Yunzhong. Brother Tian, the few Grand Supreme Elders of your Five Elements Valley are also well aware of this." "Is that so?" Tian Jiqian muttered in disbelief. "The ancestors of our Juyan sect have produced many talented people. This situation has long been discovered by them. That's why there's this sect leader selection. Those who are defeated in the sect struggle have a chance to restart every 100 years. This way, although there are conflicts between the various factions of the sect, they can be controlled to a certain extent." Ling Yunfei was silent for a while, then asked, "What does this have to do with you choosing to travel with an outsider, second brother?" Ling Yunhe smiled. At this moment, there was a hint of bitterness in his smile. "Yunfei, let me ask you. In the entire Ling clan, in the entire sect, how many core formation disciples don't belong to a faction and are independent of power?" Ling Yunfei was startled. "Not many can escape," Ling Yunhe said faintly. Ling Yunhe said calmly, "Sometimes, in front of benefits, the feelings of fellow disciples and brothers are insignificant. Even if they are unwilling, they have no choice. It's just like how I ended up falling out with my big brother." Ling Yunfei was silent. Ling Yunhe sighed again and reached out to pat his head. Ever since he grew up, he hadn't patted his younger brother's head for many years. "I just don't want to give them a chance to fall out with me," he said with a smile. "Yunfei, second brother didn't tell you because it's better for you. In the Ling clan, in the Juyan sect, to be able to simply cultivate is really a very happy thing." Chapter 384. Emo Tienga didn't know what the Ling brothers were talking about. After resting for half a day, her spiritual aura had recovered. At that moment, a spiritual aura fluctuation came from not far away, and a golden fox ran towards them. Squeak! Fei ran into Emo Tienga's arms and rubbed against her like a spoiled child. Emo Tienga randomly picked up a medicinal pill and fed it like an ordinary cultivator pacifying a spiritual beast, but the two of them were communicating with their divine comprehensions. Fei, why did you come back? Did you find anything? Although Carefree Valley's terrain was complex and the spiritual aura was chaotic, it wasn't a problem for Fei. Fei was a kind of spiritual beast that lacked magical power but could quickly adapt to its surroundings. Its own spiritual aura was very gentle and almost didn't conflict with other auras. Emo Tienga remembered that when she got the stone tablet that recorded the so-called divine dragon secret technique from Ren Yufeng, she almost lost her mind. It was Fei who saved her. Its spiritual aura was gentle and stable, which could clear people's minds. Fei wagged its tail and ate the medicinal pill. It raised its head and asked instead of answering, "What's this? Don't you have clear sky pills?" Emo Tienga knocked its head. "There are so many people, how can I take clear sky pills? If other people knew I gave clear sky pills to spiritual beasts, wouldn't they immediately want to kill me?" Even in Yunzhong, medicinal pills like clear sky pills were rare. These core formation cultivators could at most guarantee that they would always have this kind of medicinal pill to take, but it was impossible for them to give it to spiritual beasts. Fei licked its lips as if it hadn't had enough and casually accepted this explanation. "All right, but master, after we're done, you have to give me a bottle." Emo Tienga was speechless for a while and had no choice but to agree. "I know. Tell me what you encountered first." "Nothing." After eating the medicinal pill, Fei leaned on her arms and said lazily while grinding its teeth, "There was just a sacrificial temple." "Sacrificial temple?" Emo Tienga was stunned. "What sacrificial temple?" "Oh, a sacrificial temple dedicated to the divine beast Black Tortoise. There are some strange things inside." "Divine beast Black Tortoise?" Emo Tienga asked. "Are you talking about the 4 symbols and 5 spirits divine beast Black Tortoise?" "Of course, otherwise, where would there be a divine beast, the Black Tortoise?" While combing its beautiful fur, Fei answered casually, "I didn't expect that after so many years, I could still find a temple worshipping one of the 4 mythological beasts in the human world. Well, it looks very old. It should be something from millions of years ago." Several million years ago. Could it be that the god realm had just been established, and the demon and spirit realms had yet to be separated into the primordial era? Emo Tienga suddenly recalled her experience many years ago. She once found a divine dragon sacrificial temple in the northernmost glacier in the celestial pole, at the bottom of the northernmost sea. Looking at the murals inside, they were indeed something from several million years ago. Could it be that there was some connection between the two? Where is this shrine? Well, this is really hard to say. Fei finished combing its golden fur and began to examine its claws. "It was Stone who brought me there. About to the west, there is a waterfall. At the bottom of the waterfall, there is a vortex formed by the 3 energies." Fei didn't have a very clear idea of directions. This was related to the fact that it could always find a guide. Besides, it was originally lazy and didn't want to remember these things. "Don't look at me like that." Fei lazily leaned on her chest and rolled around. "Although I can't explain it clearly, it won't be a problem to take you there." "All right." Emo Tienga was already very satisfied that it could say that. After thinking for a moment, she asked, "Did you go into that sacrificial temple? What's the situation? What's inside?" "A sacrificial temple is a sacrificial temple. What's the situation?" Fei. All right. Fei raised its claws in surrender. "You're the master, so you have the final say. What do you want to know? What does that sacrificial temple look like? Are there any traces of people? The Black Tortoise is worshipped inside. Does it have any wonderful power?" Fei tilted its head and thought for a moment. It then said slowly, That sacrificial temple is very big and has a lot of tunnels. If it wasn't for stone leading me, I definitely would have gotten lost. There's a shrine inside that worshipped the Colossus Black Tortoise. Its aura is very powerful. Fei Fei's eyes were filled with confusion. It's very strange. The sacrificial temple from millions of years ago actually retains the aura of such a powerful divine beast and hasn't dissipated. Black Tortoise's aura? Mo Tiange asked tentatively. Right, it's indeed the Black Tortoise's aura. Fei Fei wagged its tail and smacked its lips pitifully. Why isn't it the white tiger? What's wrong with the white tiger? Mo Tiange didn't understand. What's the difference between the white tiger and the black tortoise? Stupid! Fei Fei rolled its eyes at her. The 4 symbols and 5 spirits all have their own 5 elements. The black tortoise's attribute is water, and the white tiger's attribute is metal. If it's the white tiger's, since I'm the descendant of a divine beast, I can absorb the white tiger's aura to enhance my strength. What do you mean? You don't believe me? You can continue. Fei Fei thought for a moment and said, the black tortoise's aura is very powerful. The demonic beasts left in Carefree Valley are really strange. They can actually retain 3 auras at the same time. It has a lot to do with this black tortoise sacrificial temple. What do they have to do with it? Well, Fei Fei thought for a while and said, let's put it this way. The reason they can survive in such a strange environment is because of the black tortoise's aura. After I came into contact with the demonic beasts here, I found they all have a weak black tortoise's aura. Mo Tiange didn't speak for a long time. Fei Fei blinked and asked, Master, what are you thinking about? Wait. Mo Tiange felt she seemed to have grasped a key point. The northernmost sea, the divine dragon sacrificial temple, the divine dragon's aura, the divine dragon monument. Carefree Valley in the clouds, the black tortoise sacrificial temple, the black tortoise's aura, the demonic beasts that survived with the help of the black tortoise's aura. There must be some kind of connection between these 2 sacrificial temples. According to Fei Fei's description, the existence of this black tortoise sacrificial temple was very similar to the divine dragon sacrificial temple she saw before. They both had strong divine beast auras and main halls for worship. Are there any remains of the divine beast black tortoise in this sacrificial temple? Mo Tiange asked. Fei Fei thought for a while then shook her head. I don't know. I've never seen it before. This sacrificial temple is too big, and Shirtu only took me inside to see it. If there were also remains of the divine beast black tortoise in this sacrificial temple, then this sacrificial temple was completely similar to the divine dragon sacrificial temple she saw before. They must be from the same period, and it was very likely the work of the same group of people. She didn't know why, but she always felt there must be some secret here. Otherwise, the divine beast's aura wouldn't have been preserved for so long. It seems I have to go there, Mo Tiange murmured. I have to go there. Fei Fei looked around then said, Master, do you want to go alone or take them with you? Mo Tiange was stunned. This was indeed a problem. The last time they found the divine dragon sacrificial temple, they had so many people, but more than half of them died. If she took others to the black tortoise sacrificial temple this time, there would definitely be problems. She didn't believe any cultivator could resist the temptation of the divine beast's aura. It should be said that the higher one's cultivation level was, the more they couldn't resist this kind of temptation. This time, her companions were all very strong, so she wasn't sure she could win. But if she didn't take them with her, how could she go to the sacrificial temple? This trip was invited by Ling Yunhe. The reason why there were 6 people was because they needed to work together to ensure their safety in Carefree Valley. If she left these people, even if she had so many spiritual treasures and the help of 3 5th-rank spiritual beasts, she didn't think she could leave safely. If it doesn't work, I can only wait and see. After thinking for a long time, Mo Tiange still didn't think there was a perfect plan. She wasn't an impulsive person. Since she couldn't guarantee her safety, she might as well come back later. Whatever. In any case, it's not White Tiger, so it has nothing to do with me. Fei Fei yawned then lazily leaned on her chest, found a comfortable position, and went to sleep, leaving Mo Tiange alone to continue thinking. 5 days passed in a flash. Sure enough, Yang Qingji finished healing on the 3rd day and came back to meet them. As for Ling Yunhe, he also recovered his spirit on the 5th day. Mo Tiange guessed their injuries weren't completely healed. They just used some kind of secret technique to suppress their injuries. She didn't care about these things. She just wanted to leave this trip safely. Whether their cultivation levels dropped or not had nothing to do with her. In the past few days, Yang Qingji and Ling Yunhe were focused on recuperating. Ling Yunfei looked like he had a lot on his mind. Tian Ken was lazy, as if he didn't want to bother with anything. Only Tian Zhiqian came to talk to her frequently, discussing the Tao of array formations. Reportedly, Tian Zhiqian joined 5 Elements Valley when he was young and was immersed in the Tao of formations. Although his aptitude was quite good, he usually didn't care much about cultivation. The reason why he persisted in cultivating until the middle stage of the core formation realm was because his cultivation level was too low, so he couldn't understand the realms of formations. As for Mo Tiange, Yi clan was only a small cultivation clan, so the formations they inherited weren't very brilliant. However, she later obtained the Xuanji formation book and the ancient books in the virtual sky world. Coupled with her always serious and diligent attitude, she grasped a lot of the essence of formation theory and finally stepped into the realm of a formation expert. In terms of formation knowledge, she wasn't inferior to those formation masters, but in terms of specific application, she was still inferior to those formation masters who immersed themselves in setting up formations every day. From this aspect, one of them was good at practicality, while the other was knowledgeable. The two of them discussed the Tao of formations and felt they benefited a lot and made great progress. In order to get more formation theories from Mo Tiange, Tian Zhiqian told her everything he knew, which also broadened Mo Tiange's horizons. Although the cultivation paths of Yunzhong and the Celestial Pole were roughly the same, they didn't communicate with each other. Each had developed for more than 100,000 years, so both places had their own secrets that the other didn't know. As a result, both Mo Tiange and Tian Zhiqian gained a lot from each other. This reminded Mo Tiange of what Martial Uncle Zhenyang said before she left. If Xianxing School's cultivators cultivated to a certain level and traveled to Yunzhong, they would definitely benefit greatly and the strength of the school would increase greatly. Now she knew that Martial Uncle Zhenyang, as a late-stage cultivator, was really far-sighted. After Ling Yunhe's injuries were healed, the 6 of them gathered again, finished their discussion, and set off again. In the next few days, although there were occasional crises, they were all daunting but not dangerous. Unfortunately, there was still no news about the fretless fruit. Chapter 385. Be careful! Ling Yunhe's warning rang in her ears. Mo Tiange instantly moved away from her original position. When she looked down, she saw that the place where she was standing was completely covered by a black aura. Soon after, the black aura slowly dissipated and disappeared without a trace. This was the 10th day since they entered Carefree Valley. They had already searched more than half of the inner valley. Half a day ago, Ling Yunhe finally sensed the location of the Carefree fruit, and they were now heading towards their destination. Right now, they were in a strange black aura swamp. It was gloomy and gloomy, with countless black liquids and gases floating around. Even core formation cultivators like them didn't know what they were. They only knew they were poisonous. Originally, they thought this swamp was too dangerous and wanted to find another way. However, the place Ling Yunhe finally sensed was in the depths of this swamp. With no other choice, they could only brace themselves and enter the swamp. This swamp was very strange. They couldn't fly here, and all their flying magic weapons were useless. They couldn't even fly in the air. Unfortunately, there was also a kind of monster living in this swamp. It was as big as an otter, and its body was covered with extremely hard black scales. It could move freely in the swamp, and if its attack missed, it would immediately turn into black aura and flee, giving them a huge headache. In terms of strength, outstanding core formation cultivators like them wouldn't be afraid of these monsters at all. However, these monsters were too cunning. In this swamp, their hands and feet were tied, so they could only be careful and vigilant at all times. Yang Qingji frowned, feeling very depressed. I really want to dig 3 feet into the ground and tear this strange thing into pieces. Emotienga smiled bitterly. Wasn't this also what the others were thinking? These people weren't afraid of fights of magical power or fighting each other, but they really hated this kind of situation where they couldn't hit or kill and were constantly being harassed. In this kind of situation, their attention was often diverted, and in the long run, they would become less vigilant. Yesterday, Ling Yunfei had almost fallen into a trap. Fortunately, Ling Yunha had released his spirit beast, the vulture, to guard the surroundings, which saved Ling Yunfei's life in time. However, his spirit beast was also injured, so he could only put it back into the spirit beast pouch to rest. There was also Tian Can. In a moment of carelessness, he threw a punch at the monster, but he was entangled by the black gas and almost lost one of his hands. The black water in the swamp was unknown, but it was extremely corrosive. If one was splashed by it and didn't deal with it in time, they would be corroded. This was also the reason why they were so restricted and had to be careful even when using magic treasures. As they used the soaring cloud crane to sense the location of the fretless fruit, they carefully crossed the swamp with their heads lowered. The group walked at an extremely slow pace. The most leisurely person was Tian Zhiqian. His strength was not obvious among the group, but he was an array master. In this chaotic carefree valley, his role was irreplaceable. Hence, everyone took care of him first. At this moment, he only needed to stabilize the surrounding spiritual energy. After several hours like this, Tian Can also felt impatient. How much longer do we have to walk? Ling Yunha stopped. After sensing for a while, he said, "The aura of the spiritual treasure shouldn't be too far from here. Based on our current speed, we'll reach it in half a day if there are no accidents." Alright. Tian Can endured the cruelty. He bandaged his wounds again and followed them. Fellow Daoist Tian Zhiqian looked at his hand and asked, "How's your injury?" "It's a bit troublesome," Tian Can said with a frown. "I really don't know what the hell this thing is." Fellow Daoist Tian Can, rest assured. Ling Yunha turned his head and said, "When we go back, I'll think of a way to cure your injury." Tian Can snorted. "No need. If we can go back, I'll find a way." Facing his impolite attitude, Ling Yunha smiled and didn't say anything. Another monster appeared under his feet, so he hurriedly dodged it. At that moment, Emotienga raised her head and looked at the boundless black swamp. She suddenly had a bad premonition. Corrosive black aura, elusive monsters, and the fretless fruit. Why did she feel that this combination was very strange? Wasn't the fretless fruit a spiritual object? Why would it hide in such a gloomy place like the black swamp? Wasn't it afraid of being corroded? She carefully scanned her companions, feeling a bit uneasy. Ling Yunha led the way seriously. Tian Zhiqian looked at the jade plate in his hand from time to time and muttered something. Tian Can and Yang Qingji frowned. Ling Yunfei lowered his head and walked cautiously. They all looked normal. "Fei Fei, are there really spiritual objects around here?" She used her divine comprehension to ask Fei Fei, who was hiding inside the spiritual beast bag. After a while, Fei Fei yawned and asked vaguely, "What? Are you sleeping?" Fei Fei yawned again. "Why not? It's so boring inside the spiritual beast bag. It's so dark and I can't do anything except cultivate. Why don't you come in and try?" Emotienga was also very curious. Why couldn't humans enter the spiritual beast bag? In essence, there was no difference between spiritual beasts and humans. What's going on? After letting her imagination run wild for a while, she heard Fei Fei's impatient voice. Emotienga regained her train of thought and repeated her question. "Are there spiritual objects around here?" Fei Fei was silent for a while. Emotienga didn't know whether it was sensing something or not. After a long time, it uttered an "huh" and said, "Strange. There really are spiritual objects in this kind of place." "Are you sure?" Emotienga asked. "Yes," Fei Fei said with certainty. "I can feel that there's an amazing aura of spiritual treasures around here, but there should be a guardian demonic beast around it. Generally speaking, in the vicinity of a spiritual connection treasure, there would be a guardian spirit of the same rank. Mo Tiange finally believed Ling Yunhe's words after Fei Fei said that. She thought for a while then asked, "What kind of demonic beast is it? What rank is it?" "I don't know," Fei Fei said. "This demonic beast isn't a spiritual beast. Its aura is the same as the aura here." "The aura here? Could it be the black aura?" This was too strange. The reason why guardian spirits would guard something was because that thing had great benefits for them. For example, eating it might increase their cultivation level and so on. But the fretless fruit was a spiritual object. What benefits would the creature in the black aura swamp get if it ate it? Or was it just a coincidence? After walking patiently for a long time, everyone except the Lingyun also sensed the aura. It was the aura of spiritual treasures, a very rich aura of spiritual treasures. It was only now that Mo Tiange was sure it must be the fretless fruit. Sensing the aura, the six of them suddenly sped up. Sometimes people were like this. Although they knew that their goal was right in front of them, they would walk weakly when they couldn't feel it. However, when the goal was clearly within their range of perception, their hidden strength would be stimulated. A cyan light began to appear in the dark sky. At first, this cyan light was scattered in the air, but as they moved forward, the light became brighter and brighter. "It's right in front of us." The Lingyun sped up. As they got closer and closer, an astonishing tree gradually appeared in their field of vision. This tree was very tall, at least several hundred feet tall. Its whole body was a strong cyan color, and it carried a strong smell of vitality. It had a sturdy tree trunk that stood perfectly straight, as well as wide leaves that opened and closed, with distinct veins. It stood there quietly, rooted deep in the ground as if it had stood there for thousands of years. At the top of the tree, there was a green fruit, surrounded by leaves, lying quietly at the top of the tree. "Fretless fruit," the Lingyun murmured, walking forward involuntarily. "Fellow Daoist Ling," Mo Tiange shouted. But before Lingyun could step on the emerald green grass in front of the fretless tree, a black light suddenly sprang up from the swamp next to him and enveloped him. The Lingyun's reaction was fast, and he instantly dodged it. Even so, his body was splashed with a lot of black water. He let out a short cry and shook his hand. "Second brother." Lingyun ran forward and saw that the left side of the Lingyun's body was splashed with black water. His Daoist robe was sizzling and smoking, quickly becoming scorched. "Brother Ling." Tian Jiqian immediately touched his Jinkuan bag and sprinkled some medicinal powder on it. The Lingyun took a deep breath. Tian Jiqian's medicinal powder wasn't very effective, but it managed to temporarily stop the black water from corroding his body. Hiss! The thing that attacked Lingyun made a soft sound, and its black eyes stared deeply at the six of them. The thing in front of her was very long, about 30 feet long, and covered in black scales. It looked a bit like a snake, but it had feet, a tail, and a thick body. After pausing for a moment, the thing darted out again like lightning. Yang Qingji, who was standing in the front, snorted coldly. He shook his arm, and with a flash of black light, the ghost face banner appeared in his hand. He unfolded the banner, and a mass of devil aura rushed out. The devil aura collided with the huge snake with feet. The huge snake trembled, but it didn't retreat. It still moved forward. Yang Qingji was stunned, but he waved the ghost face banner again. This time, the ghost face suddenly left the banner, opened its mouth, and bit the huge snake. Puff! The huge snake was bitten, but at the same time, the ghost face seemed to be corroded by the black water, and it made a sizzling sound. "Umph!" Tinan snorted coldly and rushed forward with his claws. He was a martial cultivator, so he was very agile. Just now, one of his hands was almost corroded by the black water, so he was very angry. Now, he vented his anger on the huge snake. He almost turned into a shadow, jumping around on the huge snake's body, and his claws pierced the snake's body every time. However, the snake scales were made of unknown materials, and they were extremely hard. Although Tiansan's claws pierced the snake every time, he didn't really hurt it. Looking at the huge snake, Mo Tiange knew it was most likely the guardian spirit Fei Fei talked about, but she felt strange. The guardian spirit's level was usually similar to the spiritual object it guarded. The more precious the spiritual object was, the more powerful the spiritual beast guarding it would be. However, this huge snake couldn't be the guardian spirit of the worryless tree. She couldn't tell how old the worryless tree was, but judging from the spiritual aura it emitted, she knew it could be regarded as a spiritual treasure. Although this huge snake was powerful, its momentum didn't surpass the 7th rank. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ignored it. How could a spiritual treasure with a spiritual treasure only be in the 7th rank? It was absolutely impossible. Chapter 386. Yang Qingji and Tianqin entangled the huge snake. Soon after, Mo Tiange and Ling Yunfei also made their moves. With the 4 of them working together, the huge snake was soon at a disadvantage. It shook its scales and black water splashed everywhere. The 4 of them didn't dare to be careless and hastily retreated. The black water was too powerful. It could actually corrode cultivators' bodies. They couldn't find a way to restrain it and could only retreat. The huge snake suffered a loss just now and knew how powerful the 4 of them were. It stared at them with its black eyes and didn't continue to attack or retreat. The 6 of them and the snake faced each other. Neither side dared to move recklessly. Suddenly, the huge snake blinked and dashed to the left. On its left was the carefree fruit tree. Careful! Ling Yunhe broke out in a cold sweat and slashed at the huge snake with his jade knife. However, in the next moment, the carefree tree's green branches moved and lashed at the huge snake. The huge snake dodged and dived into the swamp with a plop, disappearing without a trace. After waiting for a while, the huge snake didn't appear. Their divine senses sensed that it dived deeper and deeper until it disappeared. The 6 of them finally heaved sighs of relief. "What's that?" Ling Yunfei asked while panting. "Why did it stop us from picking the carefree fruit?" Mo Tiange was also confused. Generally speaking, the relationship between a spiritual treasure and its guardian spirit was relatively close. Although the guardian spirit might eat the spiritual treasure, compared to an outsider, the spiritual treasure would choose the guardian spirit that had protected it for many years. However, the actions of the huge snake and the carefree tree were not like that. Under the threat of the 4 of them, the huge snake scuttled toward the carefree tree. It probably wanted to eat the carefree fruit. This was normal. Many guardian spirits would do this when they couldn't protect it anymore. However, the problem was that the carefree tree whipped it and caused it to flee with injuries instead of destroying them. The 6 of them looked at each other. Ling Yunfei asked, "What is that thing?" "I don't know." Ling Yunhe calmed down after being corroded by the black water. He said, "It's not a guardian spirit. It seems to be hostile toward the carefree tree." "That's not strange." Tian Jiqian said, "The aura of this swamp isn't spiritual energy. However, a spiritual object like the carefree tree actually grows in the swamp. Logically speaking, these 2 auras should be opposing each other. Therefore, the only plausible explanation is that this giant snake is here to destroy the worryless tree." Yang Qingji looked at the surrounding swamp and then at the carefree tree. He frowned and said, "Since they are on opposite sides, why is this carefree tree growing in the swamp?" No one could answer this question. There were too many mysteries in the cultivation world. Even a nascent soul cultivator couldn't know the answer to everything. "Don't talk so much," Tian Jiqian said. "Didn't you say that the carefree fruit can be buried? If we don't pick it now, what if it runs away?" His words were like a wake-up call. Ling Yunhe said, "Brother Tian is right, let's move quickly." During this period of time, Ling Yunhe had already taken some pills and temporarily stopped his injuries. Now, he took out a silver net from his cosmos sack and walked toward the carefree tree. Aside from him, the other 5 people stared at the net intently. Mo Tiange, Yang Qingji, and Tianqin stared at Ling Yunhe. They had always heard that the carefree fruit was a spiritual connecting treasure, but they didn't know how it was spiritual connecting. Ling Yunfei and Tian Jiqian, on the other hand, stared at the 3 of them nervously to prevent them from suddenly attacking and snatching it. As Ling Yunhe approached, the green carefree fruit on the top of the carefree tree started to sway as if it sensed danger. The whole tree started to tremble. Ling Yunhe became even more cautious. The carefree fruit was like a living thing that could be buried. In other words, it could escape. If they let it run away now, their previous efforts would have been in vain. Everything would have been for naught. The green fruit on the top of the tree shook more and more violently. All of a sudden, it fell off the top and fell. The five of them felt their hearts in their throats as they stared intently at the carefree fruit. They almost wanted to rush up to it. At this time, Ling Yunhe moved. Although half of his body was corroded, his agility wasn't affected at all. He spread out the silver net, grabbed one corner of the net with one hand, and threw it out. Dong! The six of them heaved sighs of relief. The moment the fretless fruit entered the soil, the silver net separated it from the soil and caught the fretless fruit in it. Ling Yunhe closed his eyes and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He walked forward, picked up the silver net, and put the carefree fruit into his Qiankuan bag. Thank you for your help. Ling Yunhe turned around, a smile on his face. Everyone, your mission ends here. It can be considered complete. As for the rewards, I will definitely pay them when we return to the Ling family. I hope fellow Daoist Ling means what you say. Yang Qingji said coldly. In the end, no one went back on their word and came to fight for the fruit, which made Ling Yunhe and the other two very happy. To be honest, whether it was Yang Qingji, Mo Tiange, or Tian Can, as long as one of them made a move, they would be in a difficult situation. Ling Yunhe had just been splashed with the corrosive black water, so it was inconvenient for him to move now. Tian Zhiqian and Ling Yunfei weren't able to react quickly enough. Fortunately, no one made a move. They didn't choose the wrong person. Fellow Daoists. Ling Yunhe smiled at Mo Tiange and the other two. Since we've completed our mission, we can leave Carefree Valley now. Do you want to go alone or come with us? Tian Can looked around and said faintly, Fellow Daoist Ling, do you think we can still leave alone in this situation? They were in the depths of the swamp, surrounded by strange monsters and corrosive black water. If they left alone, the chances of them being in danger would be greatly increased. Tian Can's tone wasn't very good, but Ling Yunhe wasn't angry. He nodded and said, I didn't think it through. How about we go back first and split up at the exit? Mo Tiange thought about it and nodded. Okay. This was the best way to deal with it. If they split up in the inner valley, it would be very dangerous. However, they didn't trust each other, so they didn't dare to turn their backs on each other when they left. In that case, it would be better for them to split up near the exit and go their own ways. Yang Qingji and Tian Can also said they had no objections. Okay, Ling Yunhe said, let's go back now. After getting the carefree fruit, Ling Yunhe was eager to go back, but Ling Yunfei was still absent-minded. Tian Zhiqian followed him silently. Since they had completed their mission, the three of them walked towards the exit lazily. When they came in, they spent a lot of effort, but it was much easier to go out. They didn't need to search deliberately. If there were demonic beasts or obstacles, they could just avoid them. It only took them one day to reach the exit. The fissure emitting filthy air was not far from them. Yang Qingji was the first to stop. Fellow Daoists, let's stop here. Ling Yunhe turned around and asked, Fellow Daoist Yang, are you going to say goodbye to us now? Yang Qingji nodded. His face was pale and cold and his tone was still cold. Fellow Daoist Ling, I'll come to you several days later to get my reward. I hope you'll be ready by then. Ling Yunhe smiled. Rest assured, fellow Daoist Yang. I'll certainly look forward to your arrival. Yang Qingji nodded. He glanced at the others several times as a greeting, then turned around and disappeared among the rocks. After Yang Qingji left, Ling Yunhe looked at Mo Tiange and Tian Can. What about you two? Are you going to leave with us? Mo Tiange glanced at Tian Can and said, It's a bit troublesome to go out alone. Fellow Daoist Ling, you don't mind if I take advantage of you, right? Ling Yunhe was stunned, but he soon smiled. Why would I? It's just a piece of cake. The last one was Tian Can. He lowered his gaze to look at his hand corroded by the black water and said faintly, Since fellow Daoist Qin said so, you three don't mind if I join you, right? Ling Yunfei and Tian Zhiqian were a bit stunned. They both looked at Ling Yunhe at the same time. Ling Yunhe was also a bit surprised. He thought Tian Can would choose to leave like Yang Qingji. After all, Tian Can didn't seem too close to them on their way here. But he quickly reacted and nodded with a smile. Of course I don't mind. That being the case, let's go. The group of 6, except Yang Qingji, continued to walk towards the entrance of the valley. Standing in front of the crack, Ling Yunhe released his spiritual beast, the vulture. This vulture was injured in the swamp, so it was now a bit dispirited. Ling Yunhe felt a bit sorry for it, so he fed it a medicinal pill and said, "Little Black, you're tired. When we go back, I'll definitely hunt a lot of demonic beasts for you to eat." The vulture raised its head and let out an unpleasant cry. Then it flew up and hovered above their heads. The aura of death slowly spread out from its body and surrounded the 5 people. Surrounded by this aura of death, the 5 people left the valley entrance. They landed on an open space in the valley, and the aura of death on its body slowly dispersed. Little Black let out a weak cry and landed on Ling Yunhe's shoulder tiredly. Ling Yunhe stroked its head with a heartache and was about to put it into his spiritual beast bag. Right at this moment, a white light flashed behind him. A ray of spiritual aura cut towards Ling Yunhe with incredible speed. Ling Yunhe's back tensed up and he fell backward, dodging this ray of spiritual aura. He turned his head, wanting to see who was so brainless as to choose this moment to attack. Was it that Qin Wei or Tian Can? But when he turned his head, he saw Ling Yunfei dancing beside him with 2 flying swords. The sword light shone brightly and pointed at him again. At the same time, Tian Jiqian shouted and pointed with his spiritual aura. The jade plate began to spin rapidly. While he was shocked, he was also gratified. But in the next moment, his gratification disappeared without a trace, leaving only double the shock. Tian Jiqian's jade plate stopped, and he felt the spiritual aura around him stagnate. He was enveloped by the spirit-trapping formation. His face lost all color. Looking at the 2 people in front of him, he trembled, almost like an old man unable to speak. "You?" Ling Yunfei's face, which had always been not calm, revealed a sharp expression as he stared at him. Tian Jiqian, on the other hand, lowered his eyes and stood expressionlessly in front of him. Chapter 387. Why? Ling Yunhe seemed to have lost all his strength. He didn't even summon his treasure. He stared blankly at the 2 people in front of him. "You, brother Tian, why, second brother, didn't you say it before?" Ling Yunfei stared at him. His gaze was steady and unwavering. In the face of profit, the feelings of fellow disciples and brothers are insignificant. Even if I'm not willing, I have no choice. Ling Yunhe stared at him without blinking. He said softly, "Then, are you willing?" Ling Yunfei's silence answered him. Ling Yunhe sighed deeply. He hadn't been happy these days. But today, he felt despair for the first time. "Brother Tian, what about you? The conflict of our Juyen sect has nothing to do with you, right?" "Yes, it has nothing to do with me." Tian Jiqian still didn't raise his head. He lowered his gaze and looked at the jade plate in his hand. His voice was indifferent. "But Yunfei gave me reasonable conditions." "Conditions?" Ling Yunhe muttered. He looked at Tian Jiqian and then at Ling Yunfei. He revealed an expression that looked like he was crying and laughing. "What conditions?" After a long silence, Tian Jiqian took a deep breath. He raised his head and looked at Ling Yunhe calmly. "You don't need to know what the conditions are. You only need to know that Yunfei is more generous than you are." Ling Yunhe gritted his teeth and continued to ask, "I'm not generous to you? We've known each other for 100 years. When have I ever mistreated you?" Tian Jiqian sighed. He looked at him with a mixture of pity and sympathy. "Ling Yunhe, you've always thought that you were very successful, right? You have talent, background, the respect and training of your elders, and the love and admiration of your peers. Unfortunately, you never knew how much of a failure you are." "I really don't know," Ling Yunhe murmured. "I really don't know how I've wronged you for you to treat me like this." "Heh." Tian Jiqian revealed a mocking smile. "That's right. You've always treated me as your closest friend. But you're always used to ignoring those close to you. Just this time, how many treasures did you use to invite these people? What about me? It's just one sentence. You always let the people closest to you do this and that for you, but you never thought of giving us anything in return. You are generous and trustworthy to others, but what about us? I have never known how to give but to take. Ling Yunhe stared blankly at the person in front of him, the person who was once his closest and most reliable friend, the person who was willing to leave his back to him without any hesitation, the person whom he relied on when he was in danger of life and death. Suddenly, he felt that he didn't know this person at all. Yunfei, what about you? Do you think so too? He looked at Ling Yunfei and asked. Faced with this question, Ling Yunfei finally didn't dare to look straight at him. He lowered his gaze and said, We are all from the side branches of the Ling family. From the moment our spiritual roots were tested, we grew up together. Second brother, your spiritual roots are better than mine, your perception is higher than mine, and your cultivation speed is always faster than mine. As for me, my aptitude can only be considered not bad, and my perception is much worse than yours. It's been so many years. If it weren't for you, perhaps I would still be in the foundation building stage, and I wouldn't have been able to advance to the core formation stage before the age of 200. If that's the case, why do you treat me like this? Ling Yunhe stared at him. Is what I've given you not enough? It's not little. Ling Yunfei raised his head and smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. But, second brother, I don't want to always follow behind you, waiting for you to give. Ling Yunhe stared at Ling Yunfei. He didn't even blink and didn't say anything. Ling Yunfei sighed softly and continued to say, Second brother, you've indeed treated me very well, but you have never put me on the same level as you. For almost 200 years, you've always treated me as the little six who followed behind you with snot dripping from his nose, calling me second brother. You didn't tell me anything. You didn't tell me when the price of the house fell, making me be kept in the dark like an outsider. You didn't tell me when you planned to come to Carefree Valley. If it wasn't for my strong request, you wouldn't have brought me here. You had the soul restraining bead and the medallion of repayment, but I didn't know anything. Am I really your most trusted brother? You have so many secrets, but you've never told me. You've made so many decisions, but you've never asked for my opinion. At this point, Ling Yunfei laughed bitterly and looked away. His eyes were filled with determination and resolution. It's been almost 200 years. I don't want to be the little six who followed behind you with snot dripping from his nose, calling me second brother. Ling Yunhe closed his eyes. He only opened them when the corners of his eyes were no longer wet. He said calmly, I've told you before that in the Zhiyan sect, in the Ling family, it's a kind of happiness to be able to simply cultivate. Since you've hidden your strength and bided your time for so many years, don't you understand this principle? That's your way of thinking, Ling Yunfei said coldly. Second brother, have you realized that you've made another mistake? You've always imposed your own way of thinking on others, but you've never thought that other people's way of thinking is different from yours. You're an influential person, you're favored by the heavens. That's why you can confidently say that you don't want anything, that you only want the happiness of simply cultivating. But have you ever thought that the reason you can be so sad and beautiful is because you have everything? His voice grew louder, and the muscles on his face twitched. He tried to balance his breathing before he continued to speak calmly. You didn't ask me if I wanted it, but you decided for me what to give me. This is what you think is good for me, Ling Yunfei smiled coldly. What? You have nothing to say, second brother? After a while, Ling Yunhe said softly, I really have nothing to say. Yunfei, you're indeed no longer the little six who followed behind me with snot dripping from his nose and called me second brother. It turns out that I've never known you before. I have nothing to say. All right then you, however, Ling Yunhe raised his voice and looked coldly at Ling Yunfei. I want to know, what benefits does killing me bring you? For you to painstakingly plan and spend so much effort to rope in Tianjiqian, there must be great benefits, right? Ling Yunfei smiled softly and said coldly, You don't need to know this. Clang. The longer sword of the dual flying sword made a clear sound, flashed a snow-like light, and stabbed towards Ling Yunhe. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. Ling Yunfei's sword was blocked by a spiritual aura. Ling Yunfei's expression changed greatly when he saw the person who attacked. You. Imo Tiange waved her hand and withdrew her heaven and earth fan. She smiled slightly. Fellow Daoist Yunfei, you're too impatient. How could you forget there are outsiders here? Ling Yunfei stared at Imo Tiange and Tianken with a stern expression on his face. Fortunately, Tian Zhiqian pulled him back at that moment, so his expression softened and he said calmly, Fellow Daoist Qin, this is my Ling clan's matter. I hope you won't interfere. Imo Tiange said faintly, I don't feel like getting involved in other people's business, but I have no choice but to get involved in this matter. Upon seeing Ling Yunfei's furious expression, she laughed. Fellow Daoist Yunfei, have you forgotten? I came here because I made a deal with fellow Daoist Ling, and I haven't received the balance of the payment yet. How could I let fellow Daoist Yunfei kill my debtor? By the time she finished speaking, Ling Yunfei's expression had become stunned. He was stunned for a moment then said, Fellow Daoist Qin, you've already taken the repaying kindness medallion. What else do you want? If you want something, just take the repaying kindness medallion to Juyen sect. Someone will take care of it for you. Imo Tiange's expression didn't change. She still said with a smile, Fellow Daoist Yunfei, what fellow Daoist Ling promised me is a big secret. I don't want to tell another person about it. Ling Yunfei was speechless for a long time. Yunfei, she just wants to help Ling Yunhe. She's just looking for an excuse. Don't be led by her, Tian Zhiqian reminded him seriously. Imo Tiange just waved the heaven and earth fan in her hand and smiled without saying anything. She neither confirmed nor denied it. Upon seeing her behavior, Ling Yunfei's expression darkened. Fellow Daoist Qin, you have to think it over. Do you really want to fight with us? Imo Tiange sighed. If fellow Daoist Yunfei doesn't kill my debtor, I also don't want to meddle in an outsider's business. You, Ling Yunfei clenched his teeth and swallowed his anger. He then looked at Tianen, who was standing to the side with his arms crossed as if he was watching a show. Fellow Daoist Tian, what about you? I can guarantee you that as long as you don't attack me, I'll fulfill what Ling Yunhe promised. I'll even compensate him. Tianken lifted his bamboo hat, revealing a pair of pitch-black eyes. There was a hint of mockery in his eyes as he said, Fellow Daoist Yunfei, how can I believe you'll fulfill your promise? I can't do anything if you don't want to admit it later. Ling Yunfei's gaze darkened. I killed Ling Yunhe tonight, and both of you are witnesses. Isn't that enough? Tianken chuckled softly. His tone was frivolous. What kind of leverage is this? You killed Ling Yunhe. Will it affect you if word of this spreads? You dared to kill your beloved brother, which means you have enough benefits. Besides, you've also found a strong backer. At that time, even if the whole world knows you killed Ling Yunhe, what can they do? Some people even say Ling Yunhe plotted against the young master of Ling clan, who was also competing for the position of sect head. Wasn't he living well before? Once again, Ling Yunfei was speechless. Tian Zhiqian looked at his expression and frowned. He then cupped his hands towards the two of them and said with a smile, Fellow Daoists, please don't joke around anymore. What benefits do you get from meddling in this matter? On the contrary, if you promise not to meddle, then after we kill Ling Yunhe, the four of us will divide his belongings equally. What do you think? Ling Yunfei was about to say something, but he was immediately stopped by Tian Zhiqian's gaze. Tian Zhiqian looked at them with a smile, waiting for their answer. Imo Tiange tapped the heaven and earth fan lightly. She didn't say anything for a long time as if she was thinking. As for Tianken, he raised his bamboo hat as if he didn't hear anything. He lowered his head and continued to watch the show with his arms crossed. He even changed his center of gravity to stand more comfortably. Divide equally. Imo Tiange turned to Tianken and said with a smile, Fellow Daoist Tia, how about we join hands to kill them and then kill Ling Yunhe who can't fight back? Then we'll divide everything equally. What do you think? Tianken seemed to think for a while then nodded. Fellow Daoist Qin, that's a good idea. In this way, not only will there be 2 fewer people to divide the spoils, but we'll also have 2 more. You. Ling Yunfei couldn't help but sneer at them. Do you really think you can defeat us if you join hands? Tian'an sighed and looked at Ling Yunfei sympathetically. Fellow Daoist Tian Zhiqian, of course I know you hid your real strength, but are you really sure you and this person? He raised his chin at Tian Zhiqian with a contemptuous look in his eyes, can defeat us. Chapter 388. Ling Yunfei stared coldly at Mo Tiange and Tian. With a shake of his sleeves, the 2 flying swords revolving around him emitted a clear cry at the same time. Dazzling sword lights flashed and swift and fierce sword aura soared into the sky. This was definitely not the momentum of a cultivator who had just formed his gold core. Even middle-stage core formation cultivators couldn't achieve this. Watching this scene, Ling Yunhe sighed faintly. Sure enough, you hid your strength. Second brother, it's been 30 years since I formed my gold core. Ling Yunfei looked at Ling Yunhe coldly. I'm not as talented as you, but 30 years is enough for me to refine a superior magic weapon. No wonder you haven't asked me a single question ever since you started refining your natal magic treasure. Ling Yunhe smiled bitterly. 30 years. He had been preparing for this day since 30 years ago. Seeing Ling Yunfei's sword, Tian'an showed a mocking look. This sword is not bad. Unfortunately, you're not good enough. What did you say? Ling Yunfei flew into a rage and glared at Tian'an fiercely. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the long flying sword. With a light wave, the short sword pointed at Tian'an, fellow Daoist. Mo Tiange looked at Tian Zhiqian and asked with a smile, you've been discussing formations with me all this way because you want to find a way to deal with my natal magic weapon, right? Hehe, I really don't want to be enemies with fellow Daoist Qin. Tian Zhiqian sighed as if it was a pity. He looked at Mo Tiange appreciatively and said, fellow Daoist Qin's talent in formations is really amazing. If you join our 5 Elements Valley, you'll definitely shine. Would fellow Daoist Qin be interested? Mo Tiange tapped the heaven and earth fan in her hand while shaking her head and sighing like him. Fellow Daoistian, you're not sincere enough to invite me like this. Tian Zhiqian raised his eyebrows. He could see that although Qin Wei came from the outer endless sea, her identity shouldn't be ordinary. Her clan or sect might not be worse than the 5 Elements Valley. Therefore, he just said it casually to show his goodwill. However, her reaction and answer obviously showed that she wasn't going to respond with the same goodwill. He looked at Mo Tiange for a long time and said, fellow Daoist Qin, I really don't understand why you and fellow Daoist Tian can want to get involved in this matter. This won't do you any good, right? This was something he couldn't figure out. They had thought that as long as they picked the fretless fruit, the other 3 would leave. At that time, it would be easy for them to plot against Ling Yunhe. They had not expected that the 2 of them would choose to leave the valley together. At most, they would have 2 more people in the know when they made their move. However, they did not expect that when they attacked Ling Yunhe, the 2 of them would come to their rescue. What good would it do them? They had already confirmed that the 2 of them didn't know Ling Yunhe, and that it was just a transaction. Ordinary cultivators would just stand by and watch when they encountered such a situation, right? As long as it didn't affect one's own interests, it wasn't wise to get involved in other people's grudges. Anyway, Ling Yunfei had already promised to fulfill his promise on behalf of Ling Yunhe. Could it really be like what Qin Wei said, that they wanted to kill everyone and then divide the spoils? Thinking of this, Tian Zhiqian cautiously took a step back and prepared to set up a formation at any time. Both Mo Tiange and Tian'an saw this. They smiled at each other and each took a step forward. Fellow Daoists, Mo Tiange said, I think we don't need to talk about the reason anymore. We really don't have anything in common between us. So, fellow Daoists, are you going to make your move? Tian Zhiqian stared at the 2 of them with sharp eyes. You have to ask fellow Daoist Yunfei. Tian once again wrapped the wounds corroded by the black water. He looked up at Ling Yunfei and said leisurely, fellow Daoist Yunfei, Qin Wei and I are both in the middle stage of the core formation realm. You're only in the early stage of the core formation realm, and fellow Daoist Tian is a formation master. Do you really think you can kill us? Ling Yunfei said coldly, fellow Daoist Tian Ken, aren't you looking down on us too much? It's true that brother Tian is a formation master, but he's a formation master who can set up an invisible formation. As for me, since I've reached the core formation realm, fights of magical powers don't only depend on cultivation levels. Your cultivation levels are indeed higher than mine, but the power of my pair of inseparable swords isn't necessarily weaker than your natal magic weapons. Fellow Daoist Yunfei, you're ambitious. Mo Tiange clapped her hands softly while holding the heaven and earth fan. She looked at Ling Yunfei with a faint smile and said, but we still don't know whether I'm boasting or not. Ling Yunfei was annoyed again. How could he not be annoyed? Although the tone of these two people was very calm, they always seemed to be mocking him. They were lazy and seemed to not take him seriously at all. He had been despised by others for 200 years. Now that he tore off his disguise, he was still being looked at like that. How could he endure it? He couldn't help but raise his hand. Yunfei. Tian Jiqian only had time to call out before he saw the short sword of his pair of flying swords piercing towards Mo Tiange with a whistling sound. He didn't have much time to think. He turned the jade plate, about to cast the spirit-trapping formation. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows, turned her wrist, and opened the heaven and earth fan. With a crane cry, a red-crowned crane flew out and blocked Ling Yunfei's flying sword. Then she turned her eyes. Just as she was about to continue, she heard Tian Can shout and jump out. Fellow Daoist Qin, you can't do everything. I still want to share the booty. At this time, Tian Jiqian pointed with his spiritual aura. The jade plate froze, and the spirit-trapping formation was successfully cast. Mo Tiange smiled slightly. The moment before the spirit-trapping formation was cast, she untied the spiritual beast bag. Xiaofan go! Xiaofan, who was brought out to fight by her for the first time, blinked its eyes and spat out a bubble. Master, do you want to eat them? Mo Tiange pointed with the fan. Eat these two if you can, but don't complain that they're not tasty after eating them. I know. Xiaofan swung its tail cheerfully, opened its mouth wide, and pounced on Ling Yunfei and Tian Jiqian. Tian Jiqian's expression changed when he heard the conversation between the human and the beast, and when he saw the shining blue scales all over Xiaofan's body, as well as its momentum. A talking spiritual beast. A spiritual beast that could talk meant it had intelligence similar to that of a human. Once it had intelligence, the power of a spiritual beast would be greatly increased. How comfortable it would be to have such a spiritual beast as a companion. How could Qin Wei have such good luck? Tian Jiqian couldn't help but be greedy. He really needed such a spiritual beast. If he had a spiritual beast with intelligence, he wouldn't need to attach himself to other cultivators, and he wouldn't need to put up with those annoying people. Just because he was a formation master and didn't have the ability to fight alone, he could only stand behind Ling Yunhe for so many years, and now he could only listen to Ling Yunfei, whose cultivation level was lower than his. If he had such a spiritual beast, everything would be different. He wouldn't need to submit to others, and he wouldn't need to put up with others' ugly faces. Thinking of this, he glanced at Ling Yunfei, showing a fleeting expression of disgust. When he looked at Xiaofan again, he immediately became excited. With the lifespan of a spiritual beast, this spiritual beast and Qin Wei must only have a subordinate contract, not a master. In this case, as long as he restrained the spiritual beast and killed Qin Wei, he could. Watching Tian Can and Xiaofan fighting with Ling Yunfei and Tian Jiqian, Mo Tiange sat down comfortably in the spirit-trapping formation Tian Jiqian laid and watched the show leisurely. As she watched, Mo Tiange's expression became more and more surprised. She didn't expect Tian Can's strength to be so strong. He obviously cultivated a very advanced body-refining technique. The aura around his body was very domineering, and he always chose to fight head-on with Ling Yunfei. His moves were ruthless, and he didn't care about his life. Although Ling Yunfei's magic weapon was strong, he was forced to retreat again and again. In the end, he was even more restrained. Tian Jiqian's attention was completely focused on Xiaofan. He didn't want to hurt Xiaofan, so he could only use some trapping formations. However, Xiaofan's strength was also extraordinary. It lived in the East Sea and had always been aggressive in fights between demonic beasts. For a moment, Tian Jiqian was flustered. Without Tian Jiqian's support, Ling Yunfei was in a difficult situation under Tian Can's attacks and was soon at a disadvantage. The more they fought, the more shocked Ling Yunfei became. He originally thought that although he was only in the early stage of the core formation realm, his real strength wasn't weaker than that of a cultivator in the middle stage of the core formation realm. It wasn't until now that he realized how powerful Tian Can was. No wonder Ling Yunhe invited him. "Brother Tian!" Ling Yunfei shouted. At this moment, he could only count on Tian Jiqian for help. Tian Jiqian glanced at him and his expression changed greatly. He said angrily, "Didn't you say you could defeat one person? Why can't you defeat him at the last moment?" Ling Yunfei was a little angry when he heard this. However, he knew this wasn't the time to fall out with Tian Jiqian, so he swallowed his anger and said, "Brother Tian, this person's strength is beyond our expectations." Even though Tian Jiqian was annoyed, he knew that if Ling Yunfei were to lose, he wouldn't be able to reap any benefits, let alone obtain the talking spiritual beast. Therefore, he quickly suppressed his anger and looked at Ling Yunfei, ready to support him. After careful observation, Tian Jiqian was shocked. Ling Yunfei's dual flying swords were completely suppressed. No matter how he attacked, as long as he didn't hit his vital parts, he couldn't hurt him at all. Therefore, Tian Can chose to ignore him. However, Ling Yunfei couldn't block his attacks and could only dodge. This Tian Can was actually so powerful. Tian Jiqian couldn't help but look at Emo Tienge, who was watching the show leisurely. A martial cultivator who could completely suppress Ling Yunfei and Qin Wei, who had several fifth-rank spiritual beasts. He suddenly felt a little regretful. Why did he choose to attack now? Ling Yunfei was anxious, but Tian Jiqian wasn't. Even if the five of them traveled together until they reached the Ling clan's residence, he would only lose some valuables at most. But now, if he couldn't kill these two people, his life would be in danger. Thinking up to this point, Tian Jiqian glared at Ling Yunfei fiercely. At the end of the day, this brat was too impatient and his strength wasn't up to par. He couldn't even subdue a Tian Can, yet he wanted to replace Ling Yunhe? He's reckless and sloppy. He's far worse than Ling Yunhe. Chapter 389. No matter how much Tian Jiqian regretted it, it was already in front of him. He could only choose to advance and retreat together with Ling Yunfei. He knew Ling Yunhe's character very well. Since he chose to betray them, there was no turning back. Once Ling Yunhe escaped, he definitely wouldn't let him go. But this spiritual beast was really hard to deal with. It was a sea dragon, a sea beast that was good at using water element spells. Among the 5 elements, metal was for strength, wood was for vitality, water was for moisture, fire was for heat, and earth was for density. Among the 5 elements, wood, water, and earth all had the effect of trapping. Water was the most troublesome because it was soft and hard to break, so it was most suitable for entanglement. Tian Jiqian was a formation master. Without the support of other cultivators, he had no other way to deal with water spells except to dodge or trap them. She also knew formations very well. Once he made a move, she would remind her spiritual beast how to dodge. In addition, Tian Can always come to his side intentionally or unintentionally. He was afraid of Tian Can's terrifying strength and didn't dare to ignore him, so he was pinned down. After fighting like this for a while, Tian Jiqian couldn't help but feel annoyed. He had been friends with Ling Yunhe for 100 years and they often worked together. Every time he encountered a dangerous situation, he only needed to lay a formation at the right time. Ling Yunhe would stand in front of him and kill the enemies. If he encountered a crisis, Ling Yunhe would also think of a solution and wouldn't let him restrain him. With this thought, he looked at Ling Yunhe, who was standing in a daze, with complicated feelings. He had always thought that Ling Yunhe wasn't generous enough to him, and that he always relied on his own strength to ignore his existence, ordering him around to do this and that. Only now did he realize that the reason why he had been able to live so easily for over 100 years was because Ling Yunhe had stood in front of him. Unfortunately, he had no time for regret now. Thinking of the conditions Ling Yunfei offered him, Tian Jiqian's eyes were once again filled with fighting spirit. So what if he didn't have Ling Yunhe in the future? With those medicinal pills, he could try to advance to the late stage. How precious was a formation master in the late stage of the core formation realm. Even if he never went out again and didn't go on adventures, there would still be people begging him to exchange natural treasures for the formation tools he made. At that time, it wouldn't be impossible for him to advance to the nascent soul realm. Yunfei, retreat! Tian Jiqian shouted. It was meaningless to blame Ling Yunfei now. Ling Yunfei's strength was indeed inferior to Ling Yunhe's, and his battle experience was not as rich as Ling Yunhe's. However, he was not weak. The reason why he was being suppressed was because Tian Can's strength was stronger, and it just so happened to counter Ling Yunfei. He had this kind of situation when he was with Ling Yunhe. The flying sword is distracting the enemy. Don't fight him head-on. Calm down. After Tian Jiqian finished speaking, he waved his hand and a layer of mist rose up, pouncing towards Tian Can. This time, the support came at the right time. Tian Can's attack was blocked, and Ling Yunfei was able to escape. Ling Yunfei said. Yiqian hearing this, Ling Yunfei took out a small black object from his Qinquan bag and threw it to Lil Fan. Xiao Fan, retreat! Mo Tiange also shouted. It had Tianjiu. Tian. Fan. Jiqian Shao of the Long. Shao, quickly he Xia. He shi. Ling Yifan was surprised. It had never seen such a magic weapon in the sea and didn't know how to deal with it. Mo Tiange patted her forehead and watched helplessly as Yifan ran around in the mound. She could tell it wasn't an ordinary mound. This earth elemental magic weapon was very powerful. Yifan didn't have any experience and couldn't get away in a short time. Ling Yunfei was overjoyed when he saw the Jiqian trap Yifan. Tian Jiqian's voice came to his ears. Here. Distract him with your flying swords. After a while, Tian Jiqian broke free and pounced on them again. But this time, he didn't have such an advantage. With Tian Jiqian's command, Ling Yunfei was no longer as anxious as before. Yifan was trapped again, and the two of them were fighting against one. Tian Can was constantly worried about Tian Jiqian's invisible array, and was also disturbed by Ling Yunfei's dual flying swords. The situation was in a deadlock. Fellow Daoist Qin, Tian Jiqian shouted, when are you going to stop? I'm going to watch fellow Daoist Tian Can show off his power. Mo Tiange said with a smile. Although Yifan was trapped, Ling Yunfei and Tian Jiqian were busy with Tian Jiqian and Tian Jiqian, so they didn't have time to deal with Yifan. She didn't need to worry about Yifan's safety at all. Tian Jiqian was so angry that he glared at her. If you keep sitting here, I'll take everything for myself. He was strong, but the two cultivators in front of him weren't mediocre. One was in the middle stage of the core formation realm, and the other was in the early stage of the core formation realm. Both of them weren't weak. He wouldn't lose, but it would be difficult for him to win. Then you can take everything for yourself. Mo Tiange continued to say lazily, I don't like their things anyway. Tian Jiqian rolled his eyes. Seeing that Mo Tiange was going to stand by and do nothing, he clenched his teeth angrily. He didn't believe he couldn't deal with these two without this woman's help. Fellow Daoist Tian Can, left. Oh, I said left. How could you ignore the right? Look at you. I said the top, but you paid attention to the bottom. You're disobedient. Now you're being beaten, aren't you? Shut up. Tian Jiqian threw a punch. The powerful aura blocked Ling Yunfei's short flying sword. He immediately jumped back to avoid the long flying sword. He didn't even have the strength to glare at Mo Tiange. He regretted it. Why did he have to meddle while that woman was meddling in other people's business? After all, he didn't lose anything. While Tian Jiqian was angry, Tian Jiqian and Ling Yunfei were both happy and surprised. They were happy because Mo Tiange didn't plan to help them now, so they wouldn't be flustered. They were surprised because she looked so relaxed as if she had a card up her sleeve. Did she have a backup plan? After all, If Tian Zhiqian was beaten by them, she wouldn't get any benefits. Although the spirit trapping formation could temporarily trap cultivators, she was a middle-stage core formation cultivator who was proficient in formations. She definitely wouldn't be trapped for so long. Tian Zhiqian thought about it but couldn't come up with a solution. Tian Zhiqian was so angry that he attacked even more fiercely. For a moment, the two of them were flustered. "Yunfei, calm down." Tian Zhiqian shouted, "Don't let them mess up our formation. Otherwise we'll lose for sure." Ling Yunfei took a deep breath and focused his eyes. If Tian Zhiqian was defeated and killed by taking a step back, then he would die without a place to be buried. Would Ling Yunhe let him go for the sake of their 200 years of brotherhood? Maybe he would, but Tian Zhiqian and Qin Wei definitely wouldn't. Even if Ling Yunhe managed to escape, he would not be a match for the two of them with his serious injuries. It would already be good if the two of them were willing to spare Ling Yunhe's life. The most likely outcome would be, as Qin Wei had said, to kill the two of them, then kill Ling Yunhe, and take all of their belongings. This was the style of cultivators with tyrannical strength like them. Under Ling Yunfei's control, the inseparable swords, one long and one short, formed a circle above him. One was light blue and the other was silver. They emitted dazzling lights, sword aura and spiritual aura were everywhere. Tian Zhiqian was delighted. He knew this was Ling Yunfei's most powerful killing move. If he could use it successfully, it wouldn't be impossible to kill Tian Zhiqian in one move. Therefore, he had to make sure Ling Yunfei wouldn't be affected. In his mind, the battle situation was as clear as the palm of his hand. Everything was as clear as the heart, and he naturally displayed his skills. He found the feeling of fighting side by side with Ling Yunhe. That's right, what he did today was right. Ling Yunhe was not the only one. As long as he was strong enough, he could also control the situation. The jade plate in his hands spun madly. 5 lights flashed on it, and yin and yang changed in an instant. Tian Zhiqian stared at the jade plate without blinking, waiting for the perfect moment when the 5 elements and yin and yang in his body were broken. Clang! He heard 2 sounds. The first was the sound of sharp weapons clashing, and the second was the sound of a sharp weapon breaking a body. In the next moment, his eyes widened. The jade plate didn't stop spinning. It spun more and more crazily. In the end, it missed the moment when the formation was set up. This caused a small disturbance in the 5 elements and yin and yang in his body. He held the jade plate tightly. The jade plate spun faster and faster, but the spiritual light on it became dimmer and dimmer. He knew that this was because the jade plate had lost the support of its owner's spiritual aura. He slowly turned around and saw Ling Yunhe standing expressionlessly not far away. He only had time to say, "You?" Ling Yunhe moved his right hand, and the crescent moon jade knife fell from Tian Zhiqian's body. Fresh blood spurted out. Seeing Tian Zhiqian slowly collapse, Ling Yunhe lowered his gaze and said softly, "I only used 1 sentence to invite you. But do you remember that you didn't even need to say a word to invite me?" Tian Zhiqian opened his eyes wide and stared at Ling Yunhe. In his eyes, there was fear, panic, hatred, anger, and even more so, regret. Ling Yunhe continued, "I thought that we didn't need to talk about a deal or a reward. We only needed to say a word, and we would die for each other. I thought that this was what it meant to be a friend of life and death. I was wrong." Tian Zhiqian's eyes finally lost their light. No one knew whether the last thought that lingered in his mind was regret or not. His death caused the ongoing battle to stop. Tian retracted his claws and stood not far away to watch this scene. Ling Yunfei, on the other hand, was frozen. Ling Yunhe held the crescent moon jade knife in his hand tightly and walked toward him step by step. Ling Yunfei's 2 flying swords stopped involuntarily. He watched as Tian walked toward him. The knife light and the sword light flashed at the same time. The long sword pierced through Ling Yunhe's body. At the same time, a crescent moon light shone, and an extremely sharp spiritual aura pierced through Ling Yunfei's chest. "This sword is for you. For the past 200 years, I have never truly understood your heart." Ling Yunhe stood there quietly, letting the blood spurt out from the wound on his body. "This sword is for me. For the past 200 years, for your greed and ungratefulness." "Second brother." Ling Yunfei closed his eyes, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Finally, he collapsed. None of the reasons could hide his true feelings. If he was capable enough, he wouldn't need second brother to give him anything. If he was capable enough, he could also stand in second brother's position. He knew that he couldn't get it, so he was angry. All of this was because of jealousy. Chapter 390. The mound that trapped Xiaofan turned back into a small black lump of soil and fell down. Now that Tian Jiqin was dead, the spirit-trapping formation also lost its effect. Mo Tiange sighed, walked over to pick up the small lump of soil, patted Xiaofan's head, and threw it a medicinal pill. You can't eat it anymore. Eat this. Xiaofan swallowed the medicinal pill and asked, Master, did I lose? Your cultivation level is still low, so it's normal that you can't beat him. Mo Tiange stroked its head. Xiaohua was too naughty. Fei Fei was now the king, so Xiaofan was the most obedient. After comforting Xiaofan, Mo Tiange looked up. Tinghan was looking at Ling Yunhe thoughtfully with his arms crossed. Ling Yunhe stood silently in front of Tian Jiqin and Ling Yunfei's bodies without moving. Mo Tiange couldn't help but sneer. Ling Yunfei and Tian Jiqin were really not smart. They had such a close relationship with Ling Yunhe, but they actually looked down on him. Even though half of his body was splashed with black water and he was injured, he was Ling Yunhe, a top cultivator of Zhiyan sect. How could he be trapped by a small spirit-trapping formation and wait for death? She intervened because she knew Ling Yunhe wouldn't lose the ability to fight back. That being the case, she did him a favor. These two people were probably used to being protected by Ling Yunhe, so they ignored this problem. After the spirit-trapping formation was used, it would consume the spiritual aura of the cultivator who set it. Tian Jiqin used 2 spirit-trapping formations and also used formations to fight Tian Ken and Xiaofan. How could he maintain the perfect effect? Before long, Ling Yunhe was able to get out of the formation. Before this, his dantian and meridians had long been protected by Mo Tiange's medicinal pills. That black water corroded half of his body. Although it was a serious injury, it was only an external injury. It didn't substantially affect his strength. Tian Jiqin and Ling Yunfei thought he was so seriously injured that he could be killed easily, so they attacked him rashly. After standing for a while, Ling Yunhe's eyes finally moved. He gathered some spiritual aura in his palm and pressed it on the wound. The blood flow slowly stopped. Then he turned to Tian Can and Mo Tiange, nodded and said faintly, Fellow Daoists, thank you. Tian Can was the first to speak. He chuckled and said, Brother Ling, don't you think it's too early to thank me? How do you know that fellow Daoist Qin and I won't attack you? Ling Yunhe smiled bitterly and shook his head. Fellow Daoists, if that's the case, why did you help me back then? Wouldn't it be better to wait for both of us to suffer? Tian Can stopped smiling and looked at Ling Yunhe. You are a nice person, but your eyesight is not good. Ling Yunhe wanted to laugh, but in the end he didn't. He lowered his head and looked at the corpses of Tian Jiqin and Ling Yunfei in silence for a long time. An hour ago, these were his most trusted brothers and closest friends. Now, they were 2 corpses. Moreover, they were killed by him. Do you regret it? Of course not. Since they had chosen to betray, this was the consequence they had to bear. Although he valued friendship, he wouldn't be soft-hearted to betrayers. Fellow Daoists. Ling Yunhe's eyes gradually became firm. He slowly raised his hand and bowed slightly. His injuries were a bit serious, so he had to be gentle. I'll always remember your great kindness. Please meet me in the Ling clan's mansion in 3 months. I'll certainly repay you then. Mo Tiange and Tian Can didn't say anything. Ling Yunhe's expression was very calm, but between his eyebrows, there was a kind of speechless sadness and deep fatigue. Although they had indeed lent a helping hand for the sake of certain benefits, the 2 of them chose to remain silent at this time. Ling Yunhe didn't wait for them to answer. He took the Qiankuan bags from Tian Jiqin and Ling Yunfei's bodies and threw them to them. His tone was still indifferent. Now that this is over, I'll go back to heal my injuries. See you in 3 months. After he finished speaking, he put away their corpses, shook his sleeves, stepped on his flying sword, and slowly flew to the exit of the valley. Fellow Daoist Ling. Ling Yunhe stopped but didn't look back. Fellow Daoist Qin, is there anything else? Mo Tiange sighed softly. She picked up the 2 flying swords on the ground and threw them to him. These are your younger brother's natal magic weapons. They're useless to us. Fellow Daoist Ling, you can keep them as a memento. Ling Yunhe held the pair of flying swords and was speechless. After losing their master, they had already lost their luster and became useless. He took a deep breath and put them away. Thank you. Then he put the 2 flying swords into his sleeves and quickly disappeared into the forest. Fellow Daoist Tian Ken, we should divide the loot. Tian Ken was startled to hear Mo Tiange's voice. Mo Tiange crossed her arms, tilted her head, and stared at him. Tian Ken felt scared and stared at her. Fellow Daoist Qin, why are you looking at me like that? Although you're young and beautiful, I've never been interested in women. Mo Tiange nodded. Yes, of course you're not interested in women. Maybe you're a little interested in men. Tian Ken's eyes widened. What did you say? Mo Tiange looked like she was smiling. She walked around him twice then said, Do you really think I can't recognize you? Fellow Daoist Nye? After a while, Tian Ken sighed. He took off his bamboo hat, pulled off his mask, and wiped his face, revealing Nye Wuxiang's delicate and pretty face. When did you find me? She asked in her own voice. Seeing the face she expected, Mo Tiange smiled. You underestimate how familiar I am with you. Nye Wuxiang was stunned. What do you mean? Mo Tiange said, although your appearance, voice, and weapon have changed, your behavior and fighting style all have traces of familiarity. I don't know many people in Yunzhong, so the answer to a martial cultivator who gives me a familiar feeling is too simple. Most importantly, after that conversation, her intuition told her that Tian Ken was a woman, and she even had a good impression of her. Because of that, she began to pay attention to Tian Ken's every move. Only then did she realize that Tian Ken and Nye Wuxiang had inexplicable similarities. Tian Ken was thin and small, about the same size as Nye Wuxiang. Tian Ken was dressed in black, which matched Nye Wuxiang's preference. Tian Ken covered his face, so she couldn't see his mouth when he spoke. Nye Wuxiang was doing ventriloquism. Tian Ken's weapon was a claw. Nye Wuxiang used boxing gloves. But when Mo Tiange met her for the first time more than 60 years ago, she used a claw. With so many suspicious points added together, the answer was obvious. Something flashed in Nye Wuxiang's eyes, but in the end she laughed in a low voice. I really didn't expect someone would remember me. After a moment of silence, Mo Tiange asked, Did you get rid of the devil aura in your body? Nye Wuxiang looked up at her and smiled. I thought the first question you'd ask me would be how I advanced to the middle stage so quickly. Mo Tiange nodded. If you don't mind, you can tell me one by one. You're really impolite. Nye Wuxiang wanted to get angry, but in the end, she just shook her head and laughed. She looked around then raised her chin. Let's talk after we get out. This place really isn't a good place to stay for a long time. Although they were already out of the dangerous inner valley, the outer valley was still full of spiritual aura. If they didn't get out as soon as possible, it would be difficult if they encountered some troublesome things again. Mo Tiange agreed. The 2 of them put away their things. Nye Wuxiang restored her disguise and left the valley together. In such a short time, Ling Yunhe had already disappeared without a trace. The big tree they entered the valley from had traces of a restriction being broken, so presumably he'd left safely. He hadn't left for long, but the exit was still there. Mo Tiange and Nye Wuxiang didn't need to break another restriction, so they could directly leave through the exit of the restriction he broke. The 2 of them talked about where they were going. Both said they didn't have a specific goal, so they simply went to Descending Star City together. On the way, the 2 of them talked about what happened after they parted. Mo Tiange was very surprised that Nye Wuxiang advanced to the middle stage in just 1 year. When they parted, Nye Wuxiang still hadn't escaped from North Pole Island. Even if she didn't encounter any accidents on the way and directly found a suitable place for closed-door meditation, it would have only been a whole year since then. Logically speaking, this amount of time wasn't enough for a cultivator to advance. It only took Mo Tiange 15 years to advance from the early stage to the middle stage, but her fated chances were different. She had long cultivated to the peak of the early stage of the core formation realm. She needed about 2 years to prepare to advance and stabilize her realm. Nie Wuxiang answered this question. She didn't understand martial cultivation. It was harder for martial cultivators to advance than it was for ordinary cultivators, but the process of advancement was a bit simpler. During their daily cultivation, they condensed spiritual aura through body tempering and other methods. Therefore, they only needed to condense the spiritual aura they usually condensed into their gold cores in order to advance. Before this, the condensation of her spiritual aura had long reached the requirements for advancement, but she never had the time to enter closed-door meditation. After stealing a treasure from Tianyan sect, she blended into the group of cultivators going out to sea. Later, she randomly found a small island in the inland sea to avoid Tianyan sect's pursuit and conveniently entered closed-door meditation to advance. With that treasure temporarily suppressing the primordial devil aura in her body, her advancement was very smooth. In less than half a year, she broke out of her closed-door meditation, crossed the sea, and arrived in Eastern Tang. After arriving in Eastern Tang, she changed her name to Tiangan and wandered around aimlessly. By chance, she met Ling Yunhe. Seeing her outstanding strength, Ling Yunhe invited her to Carefree Valley. At this point, Nie Wuxiang was still worried about the primordial devil aura in her body. Although Tianyan sect's treasure could temporarily suppress her devil aura, it couldn't be eradicated. Therefore, she took this opportunity to make a request to Ling Yunhe. Ling Yunhe agreed, so she joined the group for the trip to Carefree Valley. To her surprise, she actually saw Mo Tiange again in this group. She knew Mo Tiange wasn't weak. When they first met, Mo Tiange's cultivation level was clearly weaker than hers. When they met in the core formation realm, they were already on par. When they met again on North Pole Island, Mo Tiange even surpassed her in one fell swoop and advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. Now that she herself had advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm, out of curiosity, she wanted to test Mo Tiange's strength. Thus, the sudden attack outside Ling Clan's mansion happened. At this point, Mo Tiange's interest was piqued. In that case, what's fellow Daoist Nie's evaluation of my strength? Nie Wuxiang was silent for a long time before she answered, "If I couldn't suppress you in the beginning, I'd most likely lose." Mo Tiange had just witnessed Nie Wuxiang's real strength, so what she said was somewhat modest, but it was basically true. Nie Wuxiang's body was tyrannical. If they fought speed with speed, Mo Tiange would have to be careful. However, if they fought for a long time, that would be her strength. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange smiled and said, "In that case, fellow Daoist Nie better not be my enemy." Nie Wuxiang glared at her. "Why should I be your enemy? You're just looking for trouble." Chapter 391. This time, Mo Tiange found that Nie Wuxiang seemed to be different from before. Although the original Nie Wuxiang was extremely daring and acted decisively, Mo Tiange always felt her whole body was filled with a weary aura. It was as if she had no interest in everything around her, and even whether she was alive or not didn't matter to her. But this time, although she also wandered around aimlessly, she was full of enthusiasm and vitality. Mo Tiange couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Daoist Nie, you and I were separated for a year. Did you encounter some fated chances? Why do you seem different now that we meet again?" Upon hearing what she said, Nie Wuxiang asked with great interest, "What's different?" Mo Tiange tilted her head and thought for a while, then said, "It seems that I've begun to enjoy the pleasures of life." Nie Wuxiang was stunned. She stopped smiling and looked at Mo Tiange with deep eyes. "I have to thank you for that, fellow Daoist." Mo Tiange was confused. "Thank me for what?" Except for taking her in for 3 days on North Pole Island, she didn't do anything to help her. And during those 3 days, nothing special happened, which was enough to change Nie Wuxiang's mind. Nie Wuxiang sighed softly, gazed into the distance and said slowly, "For so many years, I've always dreamed of leaving Master's control and living a free life. But after going through so many hardships and escaping from the celestial pole to Yunzhong, I suddenly realized that I didn't know what to do. It's been more than 100 years. Everything I do is what Master wants me to do. Although I'm unwilling, I can't deny that Master gave me the meaning of living." Emo Tienga wrinkled her brows. "What are you talking about? You're a human, not a tool. Why do you need him to give you the meaning of living?" "Fellow Daoist Emo, you don't understand." Nie Wuxiang shook her head and said, "Your master gave you freedom, so you live for yourself. But I'm not. Before I left Master, I couldn't be considered a human at all." Nie Wuxiang smiled and didn't explain further. Some things were difficult for people who hadn't experienced them to understand. Or in other words, Master was too successful. Not only did he manipulate her life, but he also suppressed her nature. Therefore, after leaving him, she felt lost and lost the meaning of living. To high-level cultivators, 100 years wasn't a very long time, but it was her entire life. "Fellow Daoistim," Nie Wuxiang suddenly asked, "why did you leave the celestial pole and come to Yunzhong?" This question was rather difficult for Emo Tienga to answer. She went to Yunzhong to broaden her horizons and also to follow Emo Yaoqing's footsteps. As for which was more important, even she herself found it hard to answer. Besides, she never thought of telling anyone about Emo Yaoqing. Upon seeing the awkward expression on her face, Nie Wuxiang waved her hand and said, "You don't need to answer me in detail. I know there are some things I can't tell outsiders. I'm just curious. You're a disciple of a famous school in the Celestial Pole, your cultivation is smooth, you have a master who loves his disciples as much as his life, and you've just become Taoist companions with your senior martial brother. You're at the height of your success, so why did you leave the Celestial Pole and come to Yunzhong?" Nie Wuxiang had already thought about this question when the two of them reunited on North Pole Island. However, at that time, they were still considered enemies, so it wasn't convenient for her to ask. Now that she had asked, it could be considered as solving the confusion that had plagued her for the past year. Upon hearing this question, Emo Tienga just looked at her with a smile. In fellow Daoist Nie's eyes, what kind of person am I? As a disciple of a famous school, my cultivation is smooth, I have a master and a Taoist companion, so I should enjoy the envious gazes of others in the celestial pole? Should I wait for others to do everything for me? Nie Wuxiang was somewhat unable to answer. Her intuition told her that Emo Tienga wasn't that kind of person. However, in the celestial pole, weren't all female cultivators with superior backgrounds like that? They didn't need to worry about their own cultivation path. Their elders and husbands would pave the way for them, without needing Nie Wuxiang to answer. Emo Tienga already knew what she was thinking. She said, "If I only enjoyed the shadow of my master and senior martial brother, even if I formed my nascent soul, I wouldn't be able to achieve the great Tao in the end." Nie Wuxiang suddenly turned to look at her, her gaze unblinking. "Achieve the great Tao?" "Of course." Nie Wuxiang's surprised look puzzled Emo Tienga. Could it be that fellow Daoist Nie never thought about achieving the great Tao one day and ascending to become an immortal? Nie Wuxiang took a deep breath, then solemnly saluted her. "It wasn't until now that I realized I underestimated fellow Daoist Mo. Achieving the great Tao, ascending to become an immortal, how many cultivators nowadays still thought about these things? Yes, all cultivators who set foot on the path to immortality wanted longevity. However, after the Middle Ages, the world changed into mulberry fields. For more than 100,000 years, no one had ever ascended to become an immortal. Even deification realm cultivators were few and far between. Most cultivators gave up on their desire to become immortals and turned to pursue power and longevity. Because of this, there was no longer a saying that immortals and devils couldn't coexist. Whether it was immortal cultivators or devil cultivators, the goals they pursued were no longer fundamentally different. It was hard to say whether all of this was the degeneration of cultivators or the helplessness of the path to immortality. Nevertheless, those who could still persist on the path to immortality were definitely people with firm willpower and were worthy of admiration. Seeing Nie Wuxiang's solemn expression, Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. I'm just a core formation cultivator now. The so-called Great Tao is still out of my reach, and my Tao heart is only a word. Why do you have to be like this, fellow Daoist Nie? There was no smile on Nie Wuxiang's face. She said, if fellow Daoist Mo only made me feel that there's still some joy in living when we met on North Pole Island, then fellow Daoist Mo's words today made me see a whole new world. From now on Nie Wuxiang, don't be trapped in the past anymore. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows in surprise. Fellow Daoist Nie Wuxiang looked at the distant mountain peaks and raging clouds. She felt that the world was so vast, so why did she have to abandon that free future for the past darkness? Achieving the great Tao and cultivating to become an immortal, in the past 100 years, she never thought about it and didn't dare to think about it. But it was different now. She was no longer bound and could exist freely between heaven and earth. That being the case, why couldn't she pursue the true meaning of Tao? Abandon the primordial devil aura and become a real cultivator. After crossing Mount Jialing and entering northern Qilin country in the north, the vast green mountains were covered with a layer of faint black aura, devil aura. To the north of Mount Jialing was Starfall City, a devil's domain in northern Qilin country. Northern Qilin country was the territory of Yunzhong's devil cultivators. They had 3 great devil monarchs, each occupying 3 big devil's domains. In addition, there were 7 small devil's domains, which were slightly smaller than the 3 big devil's domains but also had a large number of devil cultivators. Starfall City was one of the 7 small devil's domains. Nie Wuxiang said, the Lord of Starfall City is a devil cultivator in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. In northern Qilin country's devil's domain, his strength is neither strong nor weak. He can be considered a character. Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. She realized that the cultivators in Yunzhong, whether they were cultivators or devil cultivators, weren't so strict about the way they addressed each other. For example, in the Celestial Pole, Xianxing School and Zhengfa sect both followed the tradition of core formation cultivators being master Daoists and nascent soul cultivators being lord Daoists. The way they addressed each other was also a symbol of their status and cultivation level. But it wasn't like this in Yunzhong. In Dao schools, many nascent soul cultivators called themselves master Daoists, but it was purely a personal preference. Among devil cultivators, there were many who called themselves devil monarchs. Among them, only the 3 great devil monarchs were truly famous in Yunzhong. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange smiled faintly. She remembered devil monarch Black Moon, whom she met once in Sky Snow City. Although he was called devil monarch, he was only a core formation cultivator. Nie Wuxiang saw her expression and asked curiously, what's so funny? Mo Tiange asked, do you remember fellow Daoist Jing? Nie Wuxiang was stunned. Her expression immediately became a bit uncomfortable. Fellow Daoist Mo, about that matter, he didn't do anything to you in the end, right? Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Soon after, she realized she misunderstood and said with a smile, no, I'm not talking about that matter. I met someone in Yunzhong who looked very similar to him. Mo Tiange then told her about her encounter with devil monarch Black Moon. In the end, she said, when I saw that devil monarch Black Moon, I remembered him. Nie Wuxiang also smiled. In fact, although that fellow Daoist Jing was a bit frivolous, he could be considered reliable. That day, he knew Master's plan and fiercely resisted. If Master didn't keep him, he would have almost been killed. Mo Tiange didn't know about this matter. She was surprised. Really? At that time, you were already unconscious, Nie Wuxiang said. He said Qin Shoujing was one of the few people he could call a friend. Although he was dissolute, he didn't want to betray his friends. Moreover, the relationship between a man and a woman should be congenial and joyful. How could he be coerced into a dirty and improper act? After a pause, Nie Wuxiang sighed. I originally didn't have a good impression of him, but after this matter, I think he's much more lovable than those sanctimonious people. Seeing that Mo Tiange was lost in thought and silent, Nie Wuxiang raised her eyebrows and asked, "Fellow Daoist Mo, what are you thinking about?" Mo Tiange sighed. "If that's really the case, senior martial brother Shoujing and I owe him a lot." "Did he die on Demonic Mountain?" Mo Tiange shook her head. "He didn't. He also escaped the disaster on Demonic Mountain, but afterward, he had a falling out with a disciple of Venerable Swordsman Fuling of Gujin sect. If I remember correctly, Venerable Swordsman Fuling's disciple is the sect head of Gujin sect. What he did can be considered as offending the current power of Gujin sect, so he can't return to the sect." As she spoke, Mo Tiange told Nie Wuxiang about her encounter with Jing Xingji that day. At that time, Jing Xingji was injured and couldn't return to Gujin sect, so she didn't know how he was doing now. Nie Wuxiang said, "Fellow Daoistim, what does this matter have to do with you? Even if this matter didn't happen, could he have obtained some fated chances on Demonic Mountain? Maybe he couldn't escape the disaster on Demonic Mountain and directly died. Even if he really obtained some rare treasures from Demonic Mountain, he and Venerable Swordsman Fuling's lineage have long been enemies, so it was only a matter of time before they fell out. Moreover, he was a person with his own opinions. He's never been happy in Gujin sect, so he probably wanted to leave long ago. Why should we worry about him?" Mo Tiange was stunned and was speechless for a long time. Upon seeing this, Nie Wuxiang asked, "Did I say something wrong?" Mo Tiange sighed then nodded. "No, you're right. I was thinking too much. That fellow Daoist Jing isn't someone who needs sympathy. In fact, there was one more point Mo Tiange didn't mention. She realized that she had become more soft-hearted than before. She was actually worried about others. Could it be that because she obtained too much, her feelings were also rich? Was this a good thing or a bad thing? Chapter 392. Not long after they left Jialing Mountain, the two of them arrived at Descending Star City. This was the first time Mo Tiange came into contact with a place where devil cultivators lived. At first glance, Descending Star City didn't look any different from the cities where cultivators lived. It had the same row upon row of houses, the same never-ending stream of people, and the same streets filled with stalls. However, the entire Descending Star City was shrouded in devil aura. The closer they got to the city center, the denser the devil aura became. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang used their spiritual aura to protect themselves and walked into Descending Star City. This was different from devil cultivators. Devil cultivators wouldn't feel uncomfortable in an environment full of spiritual aura. They could even use spiritual aura to cultivate. The denser the spiritual aura, the better it was for them. However, cultivators would feel uncomfortable in an environment full of devil aura. This could be traced back to the distant past era, the origin of immortals and devils. According to legend, in the distant past era, spiritual aura and devil aura existed at the same time. Spiritual aura rose while devil aura sank. However, the world was dominated by spiritual aura and devil aura wasn't much. Later on, the world changed and devil aura became even lesser. Because of this, devil cultivators had a hard time surviving in this world. In order to survive in this new world, they learned to transform spiritual aura into devil aura through cultivation techniques and other changes. Devil territory was a special existence. A large number of devil cultivators lived there, causing devil aura to gather in the surroundings. Devil territory was formed. Because devil aura wasn't much in this world, cultivators rarely encountered it. Devil aura was mainly destructive, so when they encountered devil aura, their strength would be affected. Of course, as long as the devil aura wasn't too dense, high-level cultivators could move freely as long as they had spiritual aura to protect themselves. However, devil aura was a headache for low-level cultivators. They couldn't cultivate in devil territory at all, and mortals who lived in devil territory for a long time would have their lifespans affected. Therefore, there weren't many low-level cultivators in Descending Star City. Most of the people who came and went were foundation-building cultivators, and those who did business were low-level devil cultivators. The two of them looked around but weren't interested in the things being sold here. Mo Tiange asked, "Fellow Daoist Nya, how much do you know about Descending Star City?" Nya Wuxiang looked around and said, "Nothing." Mo Tiange's forehead twitched. "Then why did you say you wanted to come?" "I had nothing to do anyway, so I just came to look around." Mo Tiange was speechless. Speaking of which, it was the same for her. Ling Yunhe had said that they would meet again in 3 months, so she could only collect the remaining payment for the trip to Carefree Valley 3 months later. Since she had nothing to do during these 3 months, she wanted to find a place to pass the time. After coming out of Carefree Valley, she happened to be the closest to Descending Star City. She had never seen the demonic area before, so she wanted to come and see what was going on. Originally, he was hoping that Nie Wuxiang would know a bit more, but unexpectedly, she was also completely clueless. The two of them stared at each other for a while before Nie Wuxiang finally said tentatively, "Why don't we find a tea house first?" Mo Tiange was a bit hesitant. "Are there also tea houses in the devil domain? Why don't we just ask?" Nie Wuxiang then pulled a low-level devil cultivator over. "Fellow Daoist, how do I get to Starfall City's tea house?" This devil cultivator's cultivation level was only in the 5th or 6th layer of the aura refining realm. When he was pulled by Mo Tiange and realized that they were two cultivators with unfathomable cultivation levels, he was startled and stammered, "They're over there." Nie Wuxiang loosened her grip then shrugged at Mo Tiange. "See, there are still some." A year ago, Mo Tiange found it hard to imagine that Nie Wuxiang would be like this. It was even harder to imagine that the two of them would be together like this. If they were no longer enemies after their encounter on North Pole Island, then their trip to Carefree Valley this time could be considered a little more like a friend. After walking along the street for a while and listening to the rising and falling sounds of hawking, Mo Tiange absent-mindedly felt as if she had returned to the celestial pole. When she was at Xianxia school, Luo Fengxue would occasionally invite her to take a walk outside to relax and chat. However, ever since her cultivation level gradually increased and Luo Fengxue became increasingly busy because she was in charge of the steward's hall on Sweet Dew Peak, these kinds of opportunities became increasingly rare. During the 2 years they lived with Qin Shi, they were busy with countless things, so they didn't have this kind of mood. At this very moment, Mo Tiange couldn't help but smile as she experienced this leisurely contentment. After leaving Carefree Valley, she realized that she seemed to have become soft-hearted. She used to be scared, but after thinking about it carefully, she felt this wasn't a bad thing. When she was only a foundation building or even a small aura refining cultivator, she didn't dare to be soft-hearted because she was still too weak. If she was soft-hearted, it would easily affect her judgment and cause her to make mistakes. The result would very likely be a tragic death. Therefore, she could only clench her teeth and walk forward vigilantly but calmly. But now it was different. Even if she was facing a nascent soul cultivator, she wasn't someone who could only wait helplessly for death. She was no longer the Mo Tiange who could only survive by being cautious. In other words, she already possessed a certain amount of power, so she had the capital to be soft-hearted. Think about it. A small cultivator who carefully walked the world and struggled to cultivate, and a core formation cultivator who had a divine ability and was no longer at the mercy of others. Which one of them would be so easily soft-hearted? Perhaps most people would take it for granted that the small cultivator should be more soft-hearted, but in fact, it was usually the core formation cultivators who were more easily soft-hearted. This was because most of those soft-hearted small cultivators had already disappeared on the bumpy road to immortality. As for those core formation cultivators, they had long trained their judgment in their long cultivation lives. They only needed a split second to determine whether a matter was harmful or not. If it wasn't necessary, they could be a bit more soft-hearted because they had enough power and weren't afraid of the backlash. Therefore, from a certain point of view, this world was upside down. Only when one had power would they have the qualifications to be soft-hearted. Mo Tiange asked herself, could she determine whether a person or a matter would be harmful to her in a split second and then make the most appropriate handling of it? The answer was yes. In her long cultivation life, self-protection had already become a kind of instinct. Since she could, what was wrong with her being a bit more soft-hearted? But from another perspective, this wasn't a bad thing. In the aura-refining realm, cultivators had to gather spiritual aura to transform their bodies. In the foundation-building realm, they learned how to use spiritual aura and truly stepped into the gate of cultivation. From the core formation realm onward, they had to come into contact with the origin of spiritual aura and explore the true meaning of immortality. In the nascent soul realm, they had to comprehend the heavenly Tao. The more they comprehended, the more powerful their divine abilities would be. Because of that, after they reached the core formation realm, they originally had to put more emotions into their understanding of life. In order to cultivate one's mental state to be stronger, one had to understand more about one's heart. Therefore, whether it was Daoist, Buddhist, or Confucian schools, they all had the saying, "The Grand Master forgets emotions. Those who had emotions were ruthless." What are you thinking about? Nie Wuxiang's ear-piercing voice rang in her ears. Mo Tiange regained her train of thought from her meditation. She frowned then said, "Your voice is really unpleasant to the ears." Her original voice was only a bit hoarse and dull, but the disguised voice this time was really too unpleasant to the ears. It was as if her throat had already become a sieve, piercing and leaking air everywhere. Nie Wuxiang let out a low chuckle and said, "There's no other way. If I don't do this, how can I conceal my accent?" Mo Tiange rolled her eyes. "You're just looking for trouble. In such a big place like Yunzhong, who knows what kind of person Nie Wuxiang is? It's not a big deal for you to appear with your original appearance, right?" Nie Wuxiang said, "I stole Tianyan's sex treasure. If I'm discovered, that's indeed a problem, but there's no need to make yourself look like this, right? Do you think it's easy to change your appearance?" Nie Wuxiang cast a sidelong glance at her. "Why don't you give it a try? I didn't steal other people's sex treasure, so why would I need it?" Mo Tiange thought for a moment then said, "But I can indeed give it a try." Nie Wuxiang was just about to ask further when the two of them saw the tall tea flag in Starfall City. The two of them didn't hide their cultivation levels, so they were warmly received by the tea house waiter. Cultivation level represented strength, and strength represented wealth. If they could satisfy a high-level cultivator, even a casual tip from them would be a rare income for a low-level cultivator. The two of them didn't plan to make friends with cultivators in the same realm as them, so they left after asking the tea house waiter some questions. The waiter said there were inns in the devil domain specifically for cultivators to stay in, so they only needed to pay attention to the signs outside. The two of them walked around the area and soon found the inn the waiter mentioned. Outside the inn, there was a small flag with a white cloud painted on it. As soon as they stepped into the inn, someone immediately came to greet them. "Seniors, are you looking for a place to stay?" Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. The person who received them was actually a low-level cultivator, not a devil cultivator. She glanced around. This inn was quite big and didn't have many people. Most of the people inside were in the foundation-building realm. This inn seemed to be of high standard and mostly served high-level cultivators. Mo Tiange glanced at Nie Wuxiang. Seeing that she was satisfied, she said, "Not bad. Do you have a quiet place here?" "Yes, yes, yes." The low-level cultivator who received them said with a smile, "Our inn specializes in receiving high-level cultivators like seniors. We can even rent an immortal's cave. May I know how long seniors want to stay? Do you want an ordinary inn room, a separate small courtyard, or an immortal's cave?" Mo Tiange looked at Nie Wuxiang. She was quite casual about this, but she didn't know whether Nie Wuxiang had any special requirements. Nie Wuxiang looked at her and said, "I want a separate small courtyard." Mo Tiange nodded. A small courtyard was indeed a good choice. They both liked peace and quiet. An ordinary inn room could only be used as a gathering place at most. There were too many people, so living there was definitely not suitable. Moreover, an immortal's cave was too troublesome. They might leave at any time, so a small courtyard was enough. Then let's ask for a quiet courtyard. We don't know how long we'll stay, so just pick a good one. The low-level cultivator smiled and said, Okay, a superior courtyard. 2 spirit stones a day. 2 spirit stones? This price was a bit expensive. Emo Tienga raised her eyebrows. Before she could ask, the quick-witted waiter already answered with a smile. Senior, you don't know, but our inn is for cultivators. It takes a bit of effort in the devil domain, so the price is a bit higher. Emo Tienga thought about it and accepted this explanation. She looked at Nia Wuxiang. Obviously, she also didn't care about 2 spirit stones a day, so she said, "Lead the way." The waiter respectfully made a please gesture. "Seniors, please follow me." Emo Tienga and Nia Wuxiang were about to follow the low-level cultivator inside when suddenly, a person covered in devil aura stepped into the inn. "Fellow Daoists who cultivate, please wait." Chapter 393. Emo Tienga and Nia Wuxiang stopped in astonishment when they heard the voice and sensed the devil aura surging from the other party. They turned around to look at the door. The person who called them was a middle-stage core formation devil cultivator in his 30s. He had black hair, a short beard, and an aquiline nose, which made him look shrewd and gloomy. "Fellow Daoist, are you calling us?" Emo Tienga asked when she saw this person looking at her and Nia Wuxiang. The person looked at the two of them carefully, then said, "Yes. Fellow Daoists, my surname is Liang. I'm a ceremonial elder in Descending Star City." Emo Tienga and Nia Wuxiang cupped their fists at the same time. "So it's Elder Liang." Seeing that the two of them were calm and neither servile nor overbearing, Elder Liang knew they were knowledgeable people, so he smiled and returned their greetings. "Fellow Daoists, you don't have to be so polite. May I know how I should address you?" Emo Tienga held back her laughter. To be honest, it was fine if this Elder Liang didn't smile, but he looked a bit gloomy. Once he smiled, people would immediately feel he was up to no good. "I'm Qin Wei." Although she was laughing inwardly, she still maintained impeccable politeness on the surface. Nia Wuxiang just cupped her fists and said faintly, "He." "Oh, so it's fellow Daoist Qin and fellow Daoist Tian." Elder Liang went straight to the point. "May I know why you've come to Descending Star City?" Emo Tienga glanced at Nia Wuxiang. Nia Wuxiang wasn't interested in dealing with people, so she raised her chin and signaled Emo Tienga to answer. Emo Tienga said, "We're just passing by and just strolling around." "I see." Elder Liang's gaze shifted back and forth between the two of them as if he was weighing whether she was telling the truth or not. In the next moment, he still had a smile on his face. "Fellow Daoists, your cultivation levels are outstanding. It's really rare for you to come to Descending Star City. I wonder if I can have the honor of inviting you to the City Lord's mansion as guests?" Emo Tienga and Nia Wuxiang glanced at each other in surprise. They were both people who often traveled outside and were experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time they encountered this kind of situation. It was rare for cultivators to be friendly with each other unless they wanted to befriend each other. They had only just arrived at Starfall Star, but Elder Liang had coincidentally come to invite them. Was it an accident, or did he have some ulterior motive? With that thought in mind, Emo Tienga bluntly asked, "May I ask Elder Liang what's the matter? If it's just a mutual acquaintance, why don't we wait for fellow Daoist Tian Can and I to settle down before going to the City Lord's mansion?" "There's no need for that." Elder Liang's eyes flickered as he looked around. As soon as he arrived, the attendant had already stood to the side. Now, the attendants of the inn could only watch from afar, not daring to come forward. He said, "I won't hide it from you too. This is an order from the city governor. In the near future, all cultivators above the completion level who appear in Fallen Star must come to the city governor's palace." Emo Tienga was dumbfounded. Elder Liang had a very solemn expression on his face. Although he didn't intend to force her, his attitude was very firm, so she said, "Elder Liang, please forgive us. We're all core formation cultivators. If we don't have a clear reason, it's inconvenient for us to go with Elder Liang." Her words were very clear. How could core formation cultivators be easily pressured by force? The City Lord of Fallen Star City was only an early-stage nascent soul devil cultivator. Although they weren't as good as him, they wouldn't be at the mercy of others. If this elder Liang explained things properly, they would have to give the city lord a bit of face since they were in Fallen Star City. However, if he didn't say anything and only used force to invite them, they wouldn't obediently let themselves be tied up. Elder Liang was obviously used to this. He didn't look embarrassed at all. He smiled and said, "Fellow Daoists, you don't need to be nervous. It's just that the city lord has something to ask of you. As for what it is, it's inconvenient for me to tell you now. If fellow Daoists don't mind, we can talk as we walk." This elder Liang's attitude was too calm. It really didn't seem like he was plotting anything. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other. Nie Wuxiang said through voice transmission, "There's no harm in going and taking a look." Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then slowly nodded. She raised her head and said to Elder Liang, "That being the case, we'll go with Elder Liang." Elder Liang smiled and said politely, "Thank you for your cooperation, fellow Daoists. Please follow me." Right after he finished speaking, Elder Liang walked out of the inn. Mo Tiange stared at his back, then waved at the waiter who served them before. "Is this really your ceremonial elder? Were there any other core formation cultivators recently invited into the city lord's mansion?" The waiter hesitated for a moment before replying respectfully, "Senior, this is not something that normal cultivators like us who live in Descending Star City can know. Furthermore, core formation stage seniors rarely appear in the world. Our inn has only received 2 core formation stage seniors recently. However, this is indeed the ceremonial elder of Fallen Star City. This is true." Right after he finished speaking, a foundation building cultivator dressed like a shopkeeper said, "Seniors, I do know a little about this matter. Yesterday, a core formation senior was invited to the city lord's mansion from this tea house." "Oh, thank you," Mo Tiange said to them, then turned around and left. Nie Wuxiang also followed her. "Fellow Daoist Nie," Mo Tiange said through voice transmission, "can you use your divine sense to check if there aren't any core formation cultivators in the city?" After a while, Nie Wuxiang replied, "Correct. Aside from you, me, and that elder Liang, there's only 1 core formation cultivator active in the east of the city." Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. The city lord of Fallen Star City was an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be so few core formation cultivators in Fallen Star City. It seemed Elder Liang was right. All core formation cultivators were invited to the city lord's mansion. There were restrictions there, so they couldn't probe them. When the 2 of them walked out of the inn, Elder Liang was waiting not far away. When he saw them coming out, he greeted them with a smile. "Fellow Daoists, please." Mo Tiange nodded with a smile, then followed Elder Liang with Nie Wuxiang. With Elder Liang leading the way, the surrounding low-level cultivators all made way, giving the 3 of them a lot of space. "Elder Liang." Nie Wuxiang lifted her bamboo hat and said, "Can you tell us the purpose of the city lord's invitation?" Elder Liang casually cast a soundproof barrier, then said, "Fellow Daoists, you didn't come to Fallen Star City for anything important, did you?" Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang had already answered this question, but under the circumstances at that time, it was very likely they just said it casually, so Elder Liang asked again cautiously. Mo Tiange said, "Correct. Fellow Daoist Tiancan and I were just passing by this place, so we decided to take a stroll and broaden our horizons." Elder Liang nodded with a smile. "That's good." He paused for a moment, then said, "I won't hide it from you too. 2 months ago, the city lord invited all the core formation fellow Daoists who appeared in Fallen Star City to the city lord's mansion for one thing. Based on the scale of Descending Star City, 2 months should be enough for them to hire more than 10 core-bearing cultivators, right? In addition to the core formation cultivators in the city, there should be at least 20 to 30 of them. What kind of matter would require so many core formation cultivators? I can't reveal the reason for this matter in advance without the city lord's permission. However, that's the gist of the matter. Of course, fellow Daoists don't need to worry. The city lord will definitely pay you for this matter." "Elder Liang," Nie Wuxiang suddenly said coldly, "can't we refuse this matter?" Elder Liang was stunned. He cautiously glanced at Nie Wuxiang, then said, "I don't know about this." I'm only responsible for inviting all the core formation fellow Daoists who appeared in Fallen Star City to the City Lord's mansion. The City Lord will explain this matter to you. However, up until now, no one has refused. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows but didn't say anything. This matter was a bit unusual. Within 2 months, all the core formation cultivators who appeared in Fallen Star City were invited, but not a single one refused. Most core formation cultivators appeared in the mortal world because they had something to do. There were very few core formation cultivators like Mo Tiange and Ye Wuxiang who wandered around. Why didn't those people refuse when they had something to do? Was it simply because the person who invited them was a nascent soul cultivator? Offending a nascent soul cultivator was indeed something core formation cultivators had to avoid. However, how many core formation cultivators had extraordinary identities and strong backgrounds? The influence of Fallen Star City could only be considered so in the devil domain of the northern Qilin kingdom. It wasn't worthwhile for them to force themselves just to avoid offending the city lord, right? Based on this, either the reward was too shocking for those core formation cultivators to refuse, or the city lord of Fallen Star City played some tricks and they couldn't refuse. Which one was it? Mo Tiange looked at Ye Wuxiang, and Ye Wuxiang was also looking at her. Fellow Daoist Mo, what do you think? Ye Wuxiang sent her a secret message. If it was the former, it wouldn't be a problem, but if it was the latter, rashly going to the city lord's mansion wasn't a good choice. Once they entered someone else's territory, they'd have to let them make the decisions. But if they didn't go, they couldn't do anything. Although Elder Liang's attitude wasn't bad, he was very firm. They were already in Fallen Star City. If they didn't go now, the city lord would personally make a move, which would be troublesome for them. Mo Tiange pondered for a while then said, Elder Liang, what if I don't want to see the city lord? What would you do? Elder Liang smiled. This isn't the first time I've answered this question. Fellow Daoist Qin, there were several core formation fellow Daoists who said they had matters to attend to and couldn't go. I really couldn't persuade them, so the city lord personally went to see them. Later on, those fellow Daoists all agreed. Elder Liang only said a few simple words, but Mo Tiange understood a lot from his words. Those core formation cultivators were very likely to unyieldingly express they didn't want to go to the city lord's mansion, and they might even forcibly leave. As for the persuasion Elder Liang mentioned, it was very likely he'd use force to force them to go. If they couldn't defeat them, he'd report it to the city lord. As for whether this city lord of Fallen Star City would use force or benefits to make them agree after he personally went to see them, Mo Tiange didn't know. This made Mo Tiange even more uncertain. Should she go or not? If she didn't go, she'd most likely have to fight, and she'd most likely have to face nascent soul cultivators. If she went, it would be hard to predict whether it would be a blessing or a curse. Fellow Daoist Mo, let's go and take a look. Upon hearing her voice, Mo Tiange turned around. Ye Wuxiang winked at her then said through voice transmission, You know about my concealment method. I think you also have a secret escape method, right? Chapter 394. In the end, Mo Tiange accepted Ye Wuxiang's proposal. She was right. Although she didn't know what happened, she was sure those core formation cultivators' lives were in no danger. Since their lives weren't in danger, what was there for her to be afraid of? Ye Wuxiang once said her concealment technique was extraordinary. Even nascent soul cultivators would have a hard time detecting her. As for herself, she had the virtual sky world. As long as she could use spiritual aura and didn't get corroded by the dead aura like what happened to Ren Yufeng, escaping wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, she still had Mo Yaoqing's land shrinking ruler that she hadn't used yet. With that thought in mind, the two of them calmly followed Elder Liang. Elder Liang was very happy to see them. Both of them were in the middle stage of the core formation realm. If they were really unwilling, he'd be in trouble this time. He was too incompetent as an elder to always let the castellan take action. After walking for a while, the three of them arrived at a mansion in the city. This mansion occupied a very large area and occupied the center of Starfall City where the devil aura was the densest. The whole mansion was shrouded in a devil aura restriction. If they rashly probed it with their divine sense, they'd be injured by the restriction. Elder Liang. Upon seeing Elder Liang approaching with the two of them, the cultivators guarding the mansion saluted respectfully. Elder Liang nodded faintly and said, "Open the restriction." The guard respectfully used his identity tablet to open the restriction of the mansion. Mo Tiange glanced at the mansion. The guards of the mansion were led by 2 foundation building cultivators and a team of 9th and 10th layer aura refining cultivators. One team guarded the gate while the other patrolled nearby. Considering the size of the mansion, 2 teams of guards were considered few. However, the mansion's power still came from the nascent soul castellan, so the guards weren't very important. However, it seemed this castellan wasn't ostentatious and should be a practical person. Elder Liang invited the 2 of them into the mansion. They walked through corridors and halls until they reached the back garden. Mo Tiange was a bit surprised. This castellan's way of treating guests was indeed a bit casual. However, when she thought the other party was a nascent soul cultivator, she felt relieved. Their cultivation levels weren't worthy of this castellan's courtesy. When they arrived at the back garden, Elder Liang directly led them into a small parlor and said, "Fellow Daoists, please wait here for a moment. The city lord will be here soon." Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. Elder Liang smiled and invited the 2 of them to take a seat. After sending out a message talisman, he sat beside them and chatted with them. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang's minds weren't on this either. They casually agreed while waiting for the Master of Descent Star City to arrive. After a while, a strong aura approached them from afar, heading towards the flower hall. At the same time, a voice rang in their ears, "Welcome to Descending Star City, my friends." As soon as he finished speaking, a figure quickly flashed into the small reception hall and landed on the main seat. This kind of aura was undoubtedly that of a nascent soul cultivator. The 3 of them stood up, and Elder Liang rushed forward to greet him. Subordinate greets the city lord. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang also stood up to show their respect to nascent soul cultivators. When they looked up, they saw a young man dressed in luxurious clothes sitting on the main seat. This young man was very young. He looked like he was only 15 or 16 years old. He wasn't tall, and he was very skinny, unlike an adult man. Even if he was slightly shorter, his shoulders would still be broad and sturdy. This made his luxurious clothes look like a burden piled on his body, and it didn't feel like it was fitting at all. His left eye was covered with a blindfold and he had only one eye. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang were both experienced and knowledgeable people. In an instant, they finished examining the city lord of Descending Star City, but their faces didn't show any signs of surprise. Although this city lord looked young, his voice carried a sense of seniority. Furthermore, there were traces of time on his eyebrows and hands. His actual age was definitely not young anymore. "Greetings, city lord." Mo Tiange slightly lowered her eyebrows and cupped her hands to greet him. Then she immediately asked, "Why did you order Elder Liang to invite us to the city lord's mansion?" The young man's single eye was carefully examining the 2 of them. At that moment he waved his hand, signaling Elder Liang to leave. He then invited them to sit down again before saying, "Although your cultivation levels are only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, your spiritual aura is thick and condensed. Presumably, your strength is extraordinary." "City Lord, you're being too polite." Mo Tiange cautiously looked at him. This young man was different from Elder Liang. Elder Liang's devil aura was so thick that it was visible to the naked eye, but this young man's devil aura was so faint that it was almost undetectable. After the young man finished examining them, he pointed at them and asked with a smile, "This is Qin Wei, little friend Qin, and this is little friend Tianan. Am I right?" Elder Liang had already informed them of their identities through a summoning talisman. Their appearances and names were exactly the same, so this young man naturally recognized them correctly. Mo Tiange smiled slightly. Nie Wuxiang didn't like to talk, so she communicated on her behalf. The young man nodded and introduced himself. "I'm Starfall City's city lord." My surname is Mei and my name is Feng. So it's City Lord Mei. I've heard a lot about you. Mo Tianga's expression was completely calm. Upon seeing this, City Lord Mei laughed and said, "All right, let's not talk about these empty courtesies. Since little friend Qin asked me why I invited you, you must be an impatient person. How about we get straight to the point?" Mo Tianga and Nie Wuxiang naturally didn't have any objections. They were both impatient people who treated empty courtesies, so they immediately nodded and said, "City Lord Mei, please speak." City Lord Mei said with a smile, "Presumably, that elder of mine has already mentioned it to you too, right? The matter is simple. I want to ask you two to help me with something. If you succeed, I'll reward you handsomely." Elder Liang had already mentioned this before. Mo Tianga said, "This? Juniors don't understand. With City Lord Mei's cultivation level and the elders of Starfall City, your strength is quite extraordinary. What kind of matter do you need help from outsiders like us? Even if you want to help, wouldn't City Lord Mei asking some nascent soul seniors be more helpful than us?" City Lord Mei chuckled and said, "I don't blame little friend Qin for having such a thought. This matter is indeed puzzling. Let me put it this way. The matter I want to do doesn't require a high cultivation level, and it doesn't require too many people. What I need is to ensure our survival and have as many opportunities as possible. That's why I'm asking all the core formation cultivators who have appeared in Starfall City to help me." It didn't require a high cultivation level, so he didn't need to invite nascent soul cultivators because the price of inviting a nascent soul cultivator was also very high. It didn't require too many people, so even if he was a city lord with countless subordinates, he wouldn't be able to use them. Mo Tianga somewhat understood. However, City Lord Mei just said it needed to ensure their survival. Could it be that this matter was very dangerous? "City Lord Mei, please tell us the truth. We can't agree to your request." City Lord Mei seemed to have a good temperament. After Mo Tianga said that, he thought for a moment then said slowly, "This matter? I'll have to explain it to you first. Little friends, in your opinion, how long is my lifespan?" This question wasn't easy to answer. Mo Tianga could see that although City Lord Mei looked like a teenager, his lifespan was more than half over. However, some cultivators didn't like it when others called them old, especially when they looked young. Mo Tianga didn't know whether City Lord Mei had this taboo or not. City Lord Mei seemed to see their dilemma and said kindly, "Little friends, please speak frankly. There's no need to worry." Mo Tianga smiled and said, "That being the case, City Lord Mei, please forgive me for speaking bluntly. The City Lord should be between 500 to 800 years old, right?" Nie Wuxiang also nodded in agreement. City Lord Mei smiled and nodded. "Correct. Little friends, you have good eyes. I formed my nascent soul when I was 500 years old. It's already been 300 years since then, so I'm 800 years old. The reason why I've maintained my youthful appearance is because I mistakenly ate a longevity fruit when I was young, causing my appearance to remain at the age of 15 for hundreds of years." Longevity fruit? Mo Tianga was a bit surprised. The longevity fruit was one of the main ingredients for longevity pills. If eaten alone, it could also increase one's lifespan, but it would trigger other effects. It seemed City Lord Mei was young and ignorant that caused her to suffer. City Lord Mei heaved a long sigh and said, "I've lived for 800 years. Since I was 15, I've always maintained this appearance. In the beginning, I was complacent because I thought I could save a lot of look-preserving pills compared to other people. But later, as I grew older, I realized that growing older was also a fortunate thing. When this lord was young, I once had someone I loved, but that woman rejected me in the end because of my immature appearance." Mo Tianga saw that City Lord Mei's face was full of disappointment and frustration. Presumably, he was very fond of that woman in the past. 15 years old was indeed an awkward age. At this age, a man would start to understand the affairs of the heart, but he still hadn't fully grown up and couldn't be considered a man. No woman in this world would wish for their lover to remain at the age of 15 forever. At this age, he still didn't have broad shoulders. Moreover, even if she maintained her youthful appearance, being with him would be like being with her younger brother. After sighing for a while, City Lord May continued, "This matter is one of the greatest regrets of my life. Although my beloved has already turned into dust, I still can't let go of it. In the past 800 years, I've tried my best to restore my appearance, but unfortunately, I've never succeeded. In ancient records, there was a kind of spiritual fruit called the heavenly god fruit. This fruit wasn't too miraculous in terms of cultivation, but it could remove the poison caused by eating spiritual plants. I've been searching for it for several hundred years, but I've never seen it. It's as if this fruit has disappeared for a very long time and no longer exists in this world. However, a few days ago, I made a discovery." At this point, City Lord May's eyes shone with hope. "A few days ago, I discovered a secret place on Mount Starfall. I don't know its origin, but it might be an ancient ruin. Once you enter the ruins, you'll be given a test. If you pass the test, you'll be rewarded with a heavenly god fruit." Mo Tiange and Ye Wuxiang were stunned. If what City Lord May said was true, it was no wonder that so many core formation cultivators hadn't left. This kind of secret place was hard to find. If City Lord May gave them the opportunity to enter, even if they couldn't obtain the heavenly god fruit, they would still have a chance to obtain other treasures. This was a rare opportunity. Chapter 395. In front of a nascent soul cultivator, it wasn't convenient for the two of them to use voice transmissions. However, this was a serious matter, so they couldn't make a decision in a short time. Both Mo Tiange and Ye Wuxiang remained silent as they pondered. City Lord May wasn't in a hurry. She just sat there and watched them with a smile. Mo Tiange pondered for a while and felt it was better to discuss this matter first. She didn't have much desire for treasures, and she didn't know the ins and outs of this mysterious place. It was too risky to casually enter an ancient secret place. Who knew if there were any inside stories? As for Ye Wuxiang, she was trustworthy and very strong. If the two of them joined hands, it would be safer. With this thought in mind, she said, "City Lord May, Jr. just passed by Starfall City this time and came to take a look. I've already made an appointment with a friend to meet in a few months." "This, little friend Qin, rest assured," City Lord May said, "this matter will be over in a month at most. You can leave then." City Lord May, Ye Wuxiang continued to ask, "What's the inside story of this secret place you mentioned? Will it be life-threatening? You can get a reward if you pass, but what if you can't? In addition, if you find the heavenly god fruit, what will you give in exchange? If you can't find it, what will you do?" Mo Tiange's previous words were evasive. It seemed she didn't really want to go to this secret place, but Ye Wuxiang's series of questions showed that she was seriously considering the feasibility of entering this secret place. City Lord May was overjoyed and said, "As long as you agree to go to this secret place, I'll do my best to help you. If you find the heavenly god fruit, I'm willing to give you a spiritual treasure in exchange. You can ask for it. If you don't, you can also choose some from my collection. As for this secret place, I can tell you the truth. This place should be a test left behind from the distant past era. Its mechanisms won't endanger your lives. Of course, if you enter with others, you must be careful of others plotting against you." Ye Wuxiang thought for a while then asked, "City Lord, did you invite so many core formation fellow Daoists because this secret place is only for core formation cultivators? Moreover, each person can only enter once?" "Correct," City Lord May said. "After I discovered this secret place, I already went inside to explore. I am a nascent soul cultivator, so I triggered the test of the nascent soul stage. In ancient times, the magical powers of the nascent soul cultivators were exceedingly powerful. How could the cultivators of today compare? Without a doubt, I didn't pass." Later on, he ordered his subordinates to send in cultivators of various cultivation levels to explore, but all of them failed. Actually, a foundation building cultivator can also enter, and the power of the explosion won't be too strong. However, The rewards for a foundation-building cultivator aren't very rich, and there's no heavenly god fruit either. I have no choice but to ask the core formation cultivators passing by descending Star City for help. Mo Tienga wrinkled her brows and asked, City Lord Mei, didn't this matter leak out? If it's an ancient mystic land, I'm sure many fellow Daoists would be willing to go. City Lord Mei hesitated for a moment before calmly replying, I've also thought about this matter. Many core formation cultivators have visited recently, and they aren't foundation establishment cultivators that can be casually dealt with. This news won't be able to be concealed for long. My descending Star City isn't big and isn't considered powerful among the 7 minor demon regions of the Northern Unicorn Kingdom. If the other demon regions or the major sects of the East Tang or South Zhou Kingdom wish to enter this secret place, I won't be able to stop them. By then, it's still unknown if we can exchange for the God of Heaven fruit from their hands. That's why I have to hurry up and get my hands on the heavenly god fruit while they haven't decided yet. Mo Tienga nodded in agreement. Although the heavenly god fruit didn't have any miraculous effects, it was an ancient item after all. If it could detoxify the remaining poison in spiritual plants, those major sects would most likely want to preserve it. Little friends, City Lord Mei said, I can't let you have a look at my treasures right now, but I can guarantee that they're definitely treasures that you core formation cultivators yearn for even in your dreams. As long as you agree to enter and give it a try, even if you can't obtain the heavenly god fruit, I'll still give you some benefits. For core formation cultivators, the treasures of a nascent soul cultivator were naturally rare treasures. Mo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang didn't doubt this point. Junior naturally believes City Lord Mei, Nie Wuxiang said. However, it'll be very difficult to pass this secret place, right? Of course, City Lord Mei admitted. You have to be mentally prepared. This is an ancient mystic land, and the test for core formation cultivators is very difficult. You might not even be able to pass the first test. Mo Tienga was aware of this point. Before she formed her gold core, Xianxia School discovered that there was a hidden 10,000 laws of nature formation in Mount Taikang. It was similar to this mystic land and was also an ancient trial ground. City Lord Mei wasn't lying. Once City Lord Mei finished speaking, Mo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang exchanged glances. They saw the same message in each other's eyes. Mo Tienga tacitly understood. She turned towards City Lord Mei and said with a smile, This matter is very important. Junior has to think about it. I wonder, Oh, of course, City Lord Mei said, Little friend, you can stay in the manor for the time being and think about it carefully. Nie Wuxiang also said, Junior too. I hope City Lord Mei can make things easier for us. Of course. City Lord Mei smiled. If the two of you have decided, I'll have someone take you to rest. What do you think? That's great. Thank you for your trouble, City Lord. City Lord Mei clapped her hands to summon a maid and ordered, Take these 2 little friends to Fenghe Courtyard. Treat them well and make sure they're satisfied. The maid bowed. Yes, City Lord. She then respectfully saluted the 2 of them and said, Seniors, please follow me. Mo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang stood up, cupped their fists towards City Lord Mei and followed the maid out. A moment later, the maid led the 2 of them into a courtyard. The courtyard was small and exquisite. It had winding corridors, a clear pond, and pink lotuses in the pond, which made it look like a beautiful pavilion. In the courtyard's small hall, there was a plaque with 4 words, Crooked Courtyard, Fenghe Courtyard. Mo Tienga thought to herself. She really couldn't tell that this City Lord Mei was actually an elegant person. Moreover, there were restrictions laid in the courtyard, which blocked the devil aura, making the small courtyard look exceptionally elegant. After leading the 2 of them into the courtyard, the maid said, This is Fenghe Courtyard. Both of you are seniors cultivating, so it's very suitable for you to stay here. This is the East Wing, and this is the West Wing. Seniors can choose whichever one you want to stay in. I'll send someone to serve you later. While Mo Tienga was still looking around, Nie Wuxiang said, There's no need to serve us. We like peace and quiet the most. If there's anything, just call us. If there's nothing, there's no need to disturb us. This request was very normal for cultivators, so the maid bent her knees and respectfully retreated. Once the maid left the courtyard, the two of them immediately took action. They checked the surroundings to see if there were any prying restrictions. Once they confirmed there were none, Emotienga made a slight move, laying a restriction that could block divine sense. Then she and Nie Wuxiang sat by the pond. Fellow Daoist Nie, what do you think? Emotienga asked first. She could tell Nie Wuxiang was inclined to go to the secret place, but she didn't know what she was planning. I think we can give it a try, Nie Wuxiang said as expected. She took off her bamboo hat and pulled down her scarf to get some fresh air. Then, she suddenly asked an unrelated question. Do you think City Lord Mei saw through my disguise? Emotienga was stunned. I don't know. He's a nascent soul cultivator, so it's not strange for him to see through you. Besides, since he didn't say anything, it means he doesn't care. What does it matter if you're pretending or not? You're right. Nie Wuxiang sighed and said, I'm most afraid of meeting high-level cultivators. If they're curious, they can just sweep me with their divine sense, and I won't be able to hide any secrets. At the very least, the secret that she was a woman couldn't be concealed. Emotienga was distressed. If she didn't have the spirit-concealing pendant, she would be in even more danger than Nie Wuxiang. Besides, even if she had the spirit-concealing pendant, it wasn't completely foolproof. For example, Ling Yunhe and Black Moon Devil Monarch used other methods to detect that she was concealing her cultivation level. After all, there aren't many high-level cultivators. Besides, they wouldn't casually sweep around with their divine sense for no reason. Even if they found out, it had nothing to do with them, so they wouldn't say anything. Yeah, that's good. Nie Wuxiang wiped her face, then continued with the original topic. Why do I see that you don't seem very interested? If what City Lord Mei said is true, this is a rare opportunity. Emotienga smiled. You got a lot of treasures from your master, right? Do you still need to be tempted by what City Lord Mei said? Nie Wuxiang was stunned. She shrugged helplessly and said, Yes, when I defected, I practically swept away all of Master's belongings outside. In any case, I've already done it. Even if I didn't take anything, he still wouldn't let me off if he caught me, so I might as well do it a bit more straightforwardly. However, the primordial devil aura in my body hasn't been resolved. This City Lord Mei is a cultivator of the devil path, so maybe there are 1 or 2 related treasures in his collection. It'd be good if I could get my hands on them. What she said made sense. Emotienga pondered for a moment, then said with a smile, You're saying this kind of thing to me? Aren't you afraid I'll be greedy? Nie Wuxiang cast a glance at her, but she didn't seem to care at all. If it was before, I really would have been afraid, but now, I'm not. You're someone with great ambitions. If you want to achieve Dao and become an immortal, you can't relax your mental state. How could you neglect your roots and pursue trifles? She then said with a smile, Besides, although you look smart and calm, you're actually a bit pedantic inside. If others offend you, you won't be polite, but if they're polite, you'll also be somewhat polite. To deal with people like you have to be so good that you can't let go of your feelings, right? Emotienga stared at the sky, speechless. Ling Yunhe told her that, and now even Nie Wuxiang said the same thing. Was her personality that obvious? However, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was precisely because they saw through her personality that Ling Yunhe and Nie Wuxiang dared to trust her. In the cultivation world, it was quite rare to have someone you could trust. Thinking up to this point, Emotienga sighed. Alas, if you want to achieve Dao and become an immortal, you'll have more restrictions than others. Of course. Nie Wuxiang said without hesitation, If you want more, you have to pay more. This is a very fair thing. Emotienga also understood this. However, judging from Nie Wuxiang's tone, she seemed to have made up her mind to walk on the path to becoming an immortal. This was actually a good thing. In the future, she would have someone to talk to about this matter with. When she was in the Celestial Pole, among the people who had a good relationship with her, Luo Fengxue regained her power, Yi Jingwen liked to fight, and although Qin Shi had a firm Dao heart like her, his realm was higher than hers, so it was usually Qin Shi who gave her pointers instead of discussing things with her. In fact, the the so-called Dao heart will become natural once it's cultivated to a certain realm. From this aspect, it's not necessarily painful because at that time, it'll already become a person's heart. Just like you now? Nie Wushang asked. I've always felt that you don't seem to have the common greed of cultivators. Is it because you're restricted too much that this kind of desire will naturally disappear? About that, you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.